Welcome back to Fight Night Rising. Oh, look, we both got chonk hoodies. We did not even plan this, friends. We did not even plan this. We look good. Brian, how's it going? Welcome to Fight Night Rising, by the way.
Boop, I'm going to assume you're speaking to me right now.
Brian,
I can't hear you. I'm sure I'll be able to hear you shortly. But I have to say, pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me once again. And hopefully somehow we'll get our conversation flowing back and forth to each other and we can grasp exactly what's going on here.
I know, right? The new meta, ranked was down. Everything is going every which direction, right? We are kind of in the exact same place as a lot of these players where it's only our like personal experience on PvE and normal games on live right now that are guiding us. But one thing is for sure, there's going to be a lot of choice happening. But let's see who is going to be competing today, because we've got a pretty interesting lobby today, in my opinion, because we've got a lot of former winners here, along with some people who I think are going to be pretty strong in terms of the future. The number one person that I want to talk about, Brian, we talked a little bit about this before we got on, was Infernix, and how the mental in this game can be pretty detrimental, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, your ability to stay on top of your mental game is so key in these scenarios, especially where it's like this continuing thing where you are fearing a narrative being shaped around you and being said, oh, you can't finish in this scenario. And we talked about how Infernix just had a really explosive start and then a little bit of a fade as we got to the end. And that's definitely going to be huge if Infernix can overcome that same type of petering out this week.
And to give everyone a little bit of context, Infernix had a perfect score going into the fourth lobby, got 7th, won the day, right? And then was so hard on himself the next week, he kind of just flamed out and wasn't able to come back. Was one of the strongest players that we had seen at Fight Night up until that point, but it just, you know, things can turn on a whim. You can be perfect up until that fourth lobby, and then things can happen. The other thing about this particular lobby too is I think we have someone in Mr.MeeSeeks that is ready to take the jump, right? I was joking before that Mr.MeeSeeks kind of owned the 7th and 8th place spot here not too long ago, but now has top 3'd a couple times, won last week, is consistently playing really well, and, you know, can play a couple different kinds of comps. So if you're in the position of someone like Mr.MeeSeeks, who seems to be on like the line of, okay, there's a community tournaments, we're doing Fight Night Rising, jumping into potentially something more, what is something like Fight Night Rising going to do to help you?
You have to have the knowledge that you belong. It's so important that you can let your imposter syndrome be completely forced out of your mind when you're in scenarios like this. You have to say, I am of the quality that I can take down these Fight Night Rising lobbies, and then eventually parlay that into even more success further down the road as tournaments get bigger and bigger. You say, well, this isn't really any different from Fight Night Rising. I was able to succeed there. There's no reason I can't do the exact same thing here, play my game, and put another big victory up on my mantle.
Okay, so something else that I want to kind of talk about with you is what have you been playing, right? Like you gotten any time to say hello to this meta?
I have only gotten in one game today. Obviously, patch just went live today. I didn't mess around with the PBE. I was playing mostly on live during the last patch, but I certainly am studying the patch notes. But patch notes are interesting, right? Like they give us clues. I like to think of them as breadcrumbs. They point us in a direction we could potentially go. But until you actually get into a lobby and are making your picks, you really don't know exactly how they're going to play out. And especially with this patch, the change is so tremendous. And in the one game I had time to play today, I felt it immediately. Trojans were just readily there. I was able to shift my strategy multiple times throughout. I would never felt like I was pigeonholed. I felt like there was adaptability all throughout the game, and nothing stood out to me as I clearly want to be in this lane. I'm hoping for this chosen on the first couple passes, or I'm hoping for this chosen when I get to deeper into the late stages of the game. It's completely open and you're able to adapt the entire time.
Yeah, the chosen opportunities are a lot, and it's throughout the entirety of the game. So a lot of people, I think, assuming, hey, you know, we get chosen so early on, is it just going to make the hyper roll meta even better? And I think the answer is maybe, right? Like, I think you could still go that direction, because I don't think the goal of these changes was to eliminate hyper rolling as a strategy.
Well, it's interesting because you're right. You should have more reliable access to these chosens, but that's not the only part of this chosen change. There's also the shift in power away from these chosens. All of the chosens have taken very substantial nerfs, and I think that is going to have some impact on just how good it is to actually re-roll these champions. Because the thing about re-rolling a one-cost chosen before is that when you got your 3-star version, it was on par with anything you could do from the 4-cost slot. If the chosen impact is such that these champs are really scaled down, I don't know. Maybe you're just better served updating your chosen all the time, having your 3-cost chosen, then going to your 4-cost chosen, and just evolving throughout the game.
You know, when we were casting the qualifier last week, one word that you used a lot was innovation. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that, but also expression too. Because I think one of the biggest complaints was the lack of skill expression in that last meta, which is, okay, I hit a brawler chosen, I'm all I need is set now. But you could hit a brawler chosen, but you're still going to need to make some decisions later on because the power levels of the rest of the lobby are going to be different now too, depending on what chosens they're going to get. I think they upped the value of some 2-cost chosens, and they over the board, except for a couple units on the 4-cost level, got buffs. So I think it really seems like to me that they want people to start using almost all of the 4-cost chosens in a carry or secondary carry situation. And one of the characters that got kind of a huge damage buff is that Aatrox. And I bring that up because we're looking at a cultist package right now, right? We saw an Aatrox with some innovation last week, went out of lobby, and it only got better. And I'm not sure Aatrox even needed the help. I think it was always secretly pretty good.
I agree with you. As soon as I saw Aatrox buffs on deck, I thought about that game we saw where an Aatrox carry absolutely dominated. And the champ has always been fine. Usually it's more of a utility type thing, but we saw what could happen if you really put some investment into the champion, some damage items, and Aatrox can kind of go off. So that's definitely a champion I want to watch today from the 4-cost slot. The only 4-cost that really got some nerfs was Kale. And interesting, we come across that point now where we're seeing this chosen Wukong, which has certainly been used as a torchbearer for Kale before. Also, a bit of a reroll comp as well. You were able to reroll Wukong before. I don't think you can do that anymore. Wukong took some real buffs, or some real nerfs, excuse me. And you see, actually, this chosen being completely ignored by MrMeeSeeks TFT. Not interested in the chosen Wukong.
Yeah, across the board, 1-cost units were very probably the strongest they've ever been in TFT, to be completely honest with you. Maybe Candyland, you can make an argument for last set, but right now it's actually really interesting because the Diana, the Wukong, some of those really easy 1-cost units, and the Nasus that you're seeing here too, were just automatic pickups, but that is not the case anymore because you're presented with more options a little later on. So the thought process is, am I going to take this option and get my answers a little quicker and leave the late game a little bit more nebulous, right? Or am I going to kind of risk it and bide my time for something that might not ever actually come? And I think that's one of the best ways to explain skill expression in this game is manipulating the RNG in this game to help you get to that specific point. And Bryan, as someone who's been in the card game biz for a very, very long time, I think you really kind of can speak to that aspect of the RNG manipulation and how the fact that you're offered so many more things can actually make choice option paralysis happen.
It can. It is a chance for skill expression, but at the same time, if you know there's always around the corner a chance of upgrading your team in a dramatic fashion, that's going to weigh on your mind. Like, sure, you could have picked up that Wukong there and made your team a little bit better. We saw MrMeeSeeks 4-0'd in that first lobby. So kind of beaten up early on, and this lobby really not looking to go all that well either. So certainly spewing some HP right now, and you have to wonder about the decision not to take a chosen there. You're obviously trying to get paid later on. And now MeeSeeks is going to go to level 4, have a chance at that 2-cost chosen. But it's very important to note the odds of a 2-cost chosen at this level also reduced. And you see here, 1-cost chosen is going to be Elise as the offered chosen here. With 3 Elises already present, this is going to be a real test as to what MrMeeSeeks thinks about this particular champion.
I don't think I have really seen MrMeeSeeks play Cultist all that much. But I mean, when the game's like, hey, play Cultist real quick, right? I mean, sometimes you got to take it when you get this many Elises in a row, regardless of what meta it is, right? You're gonna consider picking up, 7 out of 9 Elises before 2-3, right? Especially with some of the buffs that gone her way with the Mana Reeve, should be actually pretty helpful against things like mage comps. But the other thing I'm really intrigued about is where we're going to go for items and how we're going to potentially move off of just letting people hold Kale items and seeing if we're going to get specific carry type items a little bit later on. The other thing I think that did get better is Zed specifically. I think Slayers may have a good opportunity here. So, and I know there are a lot of Zed specialists out in the world. I'm intrigued to see exactly what we're going to see since this is the new day, right? Are we going to see just people playing the old way because that's how they played and it's only been a day or two? Or are we going to see people really try to push it? That's what I'm really intrigued on. And right now, MrMeeSeeks working for carousel priority.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Cultists previously is that the overall trait was so weak as compared to everything else that regardless of where Elise stood as a unit after her rework, where she was added this Mana Reeve, it really didn't have the chance to shine because you were so limited by Cultists. Like, certainly you can high roll and win a lobby with Cultists. We've all seen it. It happens still with Cultist 9, even like, early game transitions from Cultist 3, Cultist 6 into a more robust late game composition. That happened from time to time, but it was rare. And now it's not necessarily that Cultist got buffs, although it did. There was a small buff to Galio 9, but it's more about every single other trait really took some beating on this patch. Everyone else is absolutely weaker than they were previously. So we have to see if that opens the door for Cultists to just go ahead and not really change all that much as a composition, but be good enough at this point when everything else is weaker.
Speaking of good enough, Mage 5 already at 2-5 because of that TF chosen one of the best item holders in the entire game. Something that I've actually been using a lot of in terms of your language is item agnostic, right? TF is going to benefit from AD and AP no matter who you are, right? So this RFC could potentially go on an Olaf, could potentially go on a Kale a little bit later because I don't think Mort's idea was to take units away from the meta, right? Kale should still work, but it shouldn't feel as oppressive as it was. Because if you get a best in slot 4-cost carry, you should feel pretty powerful. So maybe going that Kale direction with people assuming Kale's weaker, maybe I won't go that way. It kind of reminds me of Talon near the end of last set, which is no one was playing him, and so some people just picked him up, got Talon 3 and won lobbies, right?
Yeah, we talked a lot last week about how TFT is, in some regard, certainly some metas will challenge this stance, but most of the time it's a self-correcting game. If you go as far as to everyone knows this thing is good, well, then everyone's trying to get it, and there's fewer of those units available, and then something else becomes good. So that's what you can see in those scenarios where a champion is either over or under force. If nobody's interested in Kale this patch and you can just routinely, 2-star your Kale very early, even look at some 3-star Kales late in the game. I promise you 3-star Kale is still going to get the job done. It's not going to be a problem.
I mean, any tier 3, 4-cost carry is going to get the job done most likely. And
Absolutely.
Again, I really think that's kind of what they want right now, based off what I'm seeing in those patch notes, seeing all those buffs to those 4-cost carries, specifically that Aatrox, which I hope to see today, because tier 3 Aatrox is going to hit like a truck. I think it does like 3,000 AP damage or something like that. It's nutty. And so you build for that and it can happen. But this, Darius, says a lot when it comes to where we're potentially going here. We're setting ourselves up for fortune. We have Sir Thomas on the bench, which is that Tom Kench, but it also with that RFC is starting to look a little bit like a Olaf composition.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of ways you can go here and a lot of branching paths. And that's what I was really hoping for with this patch. Just more creativity, more expression. Is this a Slayer comp in development? Is this just going to be a Mage comp when all is said and done? Or are we trying to get some fortune payouts nice and early? All of this is on the table right now. We'll have to see which direction Gangley chooses to go with a very, very comfortable 96 life.
Yeah, and I love that you said it that way because those are the types of things that you have to ask yourself almost per round, right? Am I getting value out of this chosen, right? Because there's always going to be an opportunity to trade it out, right? It's almost like the stock market, right? You hit it big one time and you think, oh, it's going to continue going on, and then all of a sudden you lose all your money, right? So that could exactly happen here to a comp exactly like this. But what this also allows is, like you said, with Fortune and Cultist, one of the biggest, I think, aspects of skill expression on those particular comps was actually how you got out of them. And so I'm really, really looking forward to seeing how, especially with these changes, people get out of those specific comps. Because how many times have you been locked into Cultist and gotten fourth, right, or fifth,
Too many.
because of just
Too many.
that's how that comp goes. It's really all about how we move away from it, and if that's going to be as beneficial as it used to be back in the day. And one thing that we haven't seen yet is Warlords, and that's definitely already just like a change that we have to see, because Nidalee got nerfed. The hex thing is
into
nice,
the
but
ground, and deservedly so. Deservedly so.
yeah, got hit with the nerf bat pretty hard. So we're doing 5 mage 3 fortune, not really a setup that we see all that often, but why not? We're already there. And question is why, I love talking about this, but why play fortune when you're winning?
Well, I mean, you still get paid on it, right? It's not the dramatic payouts that steal the headlines where you're unpacking after a 10 loss streak and piling thief's gloves all over the place, but it's 2 gold, 3 gold every single win. And when you're hot and your team is strong, like Ganglies is, I mean, this early TF, I love TF chosen very early on. I think it does such a good job of just moving you towards your late game. And then there's even scenarios where you can carry with it. Like if your items just break the right way and you get the right synergies, you can lean into it really hard, 3-star it. And I think that applies to cultists, mages, and a few different setups. So this is an underappreciated champion in my eyes. But here you're seeing why play fortune. Well, just a little bit of a gold pickup, and that means you're hitting that important 50 gold threshold, getting your maximum payout for interest, and then getting to the late stages of the game before everyone else. And that means when you're getting more reliable looks at chosen, you're getting first reliable looks at those chosen. So you're getting first picks of all those 4-cost chosens.
Yeah, and people seem to be picking up their chosens pretty early, so those reroll chosen mechanics aren't really applying to a lot of these players at the moment. It will at level 7. The other thing that I'm also really intrigued by is the last meta, we just never hit 9, unless the game happened to go that long, right? If the lobby was generally weak in the early game and the game went long enough, people would just naturally hit level 9. But that was definitely more of a rarity. I can see for sure this meta slowing down a bit, right? Choice is going to be the big word of today, I'm sure. But we should see the meta slow down just a tad based off of those reroll compositions, because when the reroll compositions got good, they got good really quickly and did a lot of damage really quickly. I think the other compositions are going to be able to catch up much faster, and the counterplay to it is going to be much easier. What Gangly is going to be looking for on this particular carousel is trying to finish off that tier on that TF. What is he looking for? Potentially a spatula if it gets there to make another mage. As the initial readings of the meta, a lot of people think mage is very, very good. And so while we have an RFC on the TF, we could just see that move over to someone like a Viger once we do 2-star that Viger.
Yeah, I think Mage was actually, even before this patch came out, a little bit underappreciated. Again, off the theory that maybe it's not baseline as strong as everything else, but it wasn't as contested anymore. Asol was still a real champion. Even Vigar was a real champion in my eyes. You could certainly build around that as your carry if it wasn't contested whatsoever. So those options all on the table. It'll be really interesting to see how we want to itemize. I don't think we got exactly what we were looking for to pair up with that tier. It could have been Spear Shojin we were looking for. Maybe even a Hodge would have been appropriate there. But instead, it looks like we're going to debate itemizing this Darius right now. Zeeks and Guardian Angel, the options available.
Whew. That's a tough choice. You might think, oh, GA, extra life, but attack speed, I'm still kind of thinking this is going to potentially, they're leaving the option open to pivot a little bit later. So Gangly is going to get locked into this comp here soon, and we're probably going to lose again until we make a decision on what this comp is going to be in the end, as we do have a Kale for Laplace. I can't see if that's Kale 2, but it doesn't matter as it lost. And it's so crazy to see Darius make it to the end of a round just in general.
Darius is a champ that has had its ups and downs. We've probably all seen a Darius pop off, and you have this moment where like, wait a second, is Darius good? And then you're like, oh no, it's not good at all actually, as it falls very quickly back to earth. But it has gotten some successive buffs. There are Slayer buffs, so maybe Darius starting to get a little bit more impact on the game at this point.
I'd love for more to be like you guys have been asking for Space Jam, and we're going to show you why you haven't been getting it. Um,
Yeah,
because I think in our minds we think about it as like it's so cool, it's just chopping all that stuff down, right? But in reality, losing to it, I remember was awful. In feel. So when you're the Darius player, it feels great. When you're going up against it,
right.
it just didn't really feel that awesome. And I think Kale's kind of like that, was kind of like that, but seems to really, I mean, you're seeing it right now. The Kale is pushing a lot of damage. It's just spread out a little bit more as MrMeeSeeks already has an Olaf 2. So we have
Yeah.
still both Elises. We're still one Elise away from an Elise 3. We're at level 6. So these cultists are already doing a little bit better, but Olaf 2 is going to carry many a team past the mid game mark, no matter what you're running beside it.
Yeah, we bounced out on MrMeeSeeks when things were going pretty poorly. Since has gotten onto a winning streak, established that Olaf 2 really nice items, and we have to see how good that champion is now. One of the key items, you saw the Death Blade only generating smaller stacks at this point. It gets a little bit more power early and a little bit less power as the fight goes on. So I'm interested to see how that impacts Olaf. But on the whole, I think it's set up very well for a return to greatness for Olaf. And if you've played any PBE during 4 or 5, you probably remember what Olaf was like before it hit live. It was an oppressive champion, could really
Oh,
carry.
yeah, I mean that's kind of like the greatest of like the PvE early on in a set. It's like expected to like literally be the Wild West, and some things just
Right.
happen, right? Like Samira, not needing any items back then, and just kind of needed to be in the team comp. As we're actually seeing a 4-1 roll down. It's been a bit since we've seen a 4-1 roll down, friends. Like this is
Really
traditionally
has.
what we saw, 4-5 patches ago. It even got a little less popular before the set, 4.5, when it came to a lot of these teams. But it seems like because you're going to be able to get 4-cost chosens potentially a little bit more frequently, why not? If you're running something like this Kale, you already have your direction, you have your idea, right? And it's so far working out for you as itsDinoDan
Well,
is going to take the L here.
the other big incentive is that this was a fortune comp. There was a fortune chosen here, and there was a 5-loss streak going on. So spend a lot of gold and get this payout. Get free of the fortune prison. You see, you get a nice spat, a tier to go along with it. So some options there as the game progresses. And let's see if it's time to depart fortune. I had a feeling completely out of it. Let's figure out what our new identity is. You want it to be Kale based, that's for sure. But who's going to be the supporting chosen for that comp?
All right, and you're seeing the fact that you're gonna get a chosen a lot of the time, but it's not gonna be the cost chosen that you want. It's not gonna be the unit. Like I was playing on PvE, all I needed was a Slayer chosen of any type, and the amount of Spirit Yumi chosens that I saw wanted, I wanted to destroy everything around me, right? And I think that that's going to be a very common experience between some people. And it already looks like Kale seems to be in a much healthier place. We'll see if it's too much on the other side here soon, but I actually like seeing it. The other thing that I don't like seeing, right, is someone who cashes out on Fortune and then loses. That is
Right.
worst case scenario.
No, that's true. But this team continues to improve, still working without a chosen. So there's a lot of space to grow for this comp. You see Lee Sin picked up, added to the mix. You have that spatula. So if you get something good either off Carousel or from the Raptors, that might really improve your team. So we'll have to see how the Place Tales can put it together.
And the thing about Laplace that was very interesting is always seems to do really well, but does it very secretly. During fight night is very quiet about their reign up, because you'll see them in 8th place like this, then you'll look back in the top 4 and see that they're on fire, right? So again, a lot of the HP totals I think are going to be a little bit more accurate than usual versus like the reroll comps. But
Mm-hmm.
it is still going to mean that usually at this point, the people on the lower half of the totem pole are starting to hit some really strong points because they have to, or else they're going to get eliminated, right? As you see a Darius 3 get completely handled, no problem, even with a Dragon's Claw. That's a feels bad for sure. As MrMeeSeeks, though, someone that we saw in last place not too long ago, is continuing their winning ways.
A rapid climb up the ladder. And you mentioned the life totals being deceiving, and Laplace Tales capacity for floating at the bottom of the lobby and then getting up towards the top. That's somebody who really understands those timing windows we were talking about, understands how to manipulate your economy, when it's safe to be weak and when you have to say, okay, that's it. I need to get strong now or this game's over. If you can turn on a dime like that, gives you a huge edge to manipulating your economy throughout the game.
All right, so we do have a returning player on screen right now. That is Yiggles. She made it in last week. It was so close. I believe it really came down to like one fight, and it was a 1v1 between Yiggles and Bloodyface, or Luna, sorry, as I remember. So Yiggles is very, very happy to be here and played probably more flexible than some of the other people in this lobby that I've seen. Played Ninjas, to I believe a second place last week, a second or third place. So I feel pretty good about Yiggles and her ability to be successful in this particular meta. And there's a 6 Fortune player on the field. I don't know if you saw that, but someone is
didn't
gambling.
catch that. Who's got the 6 Fortune comp?
I only saw the 6 Fortune during the scouting. I think it might have been Contrado. But we shall see. I'd love to see, because 6 Fortune, if you get one win, right, it's like it really just builds upon. It's a snowball situation, and you deserve it if you're crazy enough to go 6 Fortune. You deserve to win, in my opinion.
Fortune's another thing I think that's. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Boop, but Fortune's interesting on this patch too, where everyone is getting weaker. There's more room for Fortune to find those win streaks. So I think that's something we'll see more of today than we have in the past as well.
Okay, so we're seeing some Slayer comps. We got our Mage comp on Gangly. Oh, Fortune was Infernix. That's fun. So Infernix is running 6 Fortune right now. Yiggles in second place. Feeling pretty good about their comp. Already has that Samira.
Yeah, I love to see a Samira show up nice and early. Good items on Samira, able to put out some damage and have the Slayer buff, have the Sharpshooter buff, and that's really all Samira needs to get going. Going to be supported by a Shen chosen, so kind of a utility chosen, I would say, but that's what you get to do when you're constantly upgrading your team, because you're not building around, oh, I need 9 Warlords or I need X of this many champions. It's just what's good right now. What can I play and win with?
I think we're going to move a little bit closer to how to get to Bill Gates or the legendary comp from last set, personally. Especially if the games are going to go later. The opportunities for 5-cost units are going to happen much sooner, which is going to actually make Fortune stronger if that's the case, right? Because you get access to a lot of those units earlier if you cash out in time. The one thing the Samira would maybe want is a Deathblade. Or like a Hodge to get a little bit of even more HP regeneration through those auto attacks. Remember, Samira did get nerfed. The auto attack range is very short now. So in terms of positioning, you can't necessarily just put her in the back line and see her ult. You're going to have to think about it a little bit more. And that was definitely one of the bigger changes in terms of individual units in this set. But, Yiggles showing that it doesn't quite matter. We lost that last round, but not by a lot. And we also have a ton of gold.
Yeah, plenty of gold saved up. A lot of upgrades potentially to this comp. We have a Fawn, so we're working on 9 units as opposed to the 8. So a lot of space to get creative with the team composition here.
I'm just kind of like, I got my seatbelt on. I just want to see what these late game comps look like, right? What these guys and gals have been able to do in the time of learning over the last couple weeks on PBE. And remember, this patch is live today, right? And ranked was down for most of the day. And so a lot of them playing in, those normal lobbies to get practice in before today. And so I really think everyone's it's like the new patches are great equalizers, right? Everyone, I think, has an equal opportunity to do well at this point because everyone's had the same amount of access to the patch. So that is one of the most exciting things about some of these earlier patch games is, what? It's going to be a little crazy, and that's really fun because this is when innovation, experimentation, all that stuff can happen, right? I remember last time on a new patch, I saw a 4 Spirit comp, and I was like, this is amazing, and I lost with it every single time I played, right? But that's still part of the fun, right? Bonky comp is another really good example of how, early patches can really change, but that discovery process is one of my favorite things when it comes to this game, just full stop.
Oh, I agree with you completely. The exploration, learning what works, learning what doesn't work, it is definitely a highlight of this game. I have to give props to MrMeeSeeks. What a comeback MrMeeSeeks has put together after a really rough start. And if you saw the chosen MrMeeSeeks ultimately ended up with, Morgana Chosen, one of my favorite Chosens in the entire game. You know that, Boop. You've cast
I
me
do.
with me a couple times now. You know I'm a Morgana fanboy, and we saw Morgana
Yep.
Chosen there, empowering that Olaf too, and just on an
You,
absolute heater. Now at the top of the lobby.
you, sir, helped me gain some LP. Not gonna lie.
Good. I'm glad
Yeah,
to hear
doing
that.
doing that
Yeah, a big
Morgana
Morgana
Chosen
fan
thing. I
yourself.
was like,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm gonna
it's
go
real.
ahead and just listen to Brian. He's got the voice of the Golden Caster. I should listen, and it ended up working. I ended up getting a whole division just by focusing Enlightened. Contrado was someone that I actually no, was that us, or that Krellin? Was Krellin was an Enlightened player too, so that whole week was kind of like a Morgana week, and I was like, the world's telling me something, and so I went
Yeah.
along that direction, and I think she actually got a little bit of a nerf in the patch notes. So
She
very,
did.
very strong.
Her level 3. Her level 3 version did get a nerf, but still in a completely fine place, I think, to continue to be a carry here on this patch.
Mm-hmm. Oh, goodness gracious. As Infernix is going to take that win, Darius 3 is going to be good enough there. The hardest part about Darius is itemization, right? And what are you going to do? Are you going to do the Jeweled Gauntlet? Are you going to do the IE? We're going to do the Rabadon's Declaw on this Darius right now. So we'll see how long that's going to last. We got Darius 3 quite early. So Infernix has been, it seems like, alternating wins and losses, but look how close this lobby is just in general. As itsDinoDan, who's probably the least experienced player here, gets 8th place at the end of the day on this first lobby.
Yeah, early exit for itsDinoDan. We didn't really see much itsDinoDan as we were covering these rounds. For whatever reason, the person we were following just wasn't paired up against Dan. So not exactly sure where things went wrong there, but we'll see how the rest of the day evolves for itsDinoDan.
itsDinoDan. As a Saurus myself, I do like me a dinosaur-related name.
Yeah, it
really
feels like you're supposed to be pulling for itsDinoDan.
I know, right? I know. NA caster bias. Anyway, Yiggles now is looking at continuing to go with Slayers, but Olaf does seem to be a contested pick right now. Has the Aatrox, which seems to be another kind of contested pick, and something I also want you guys to see is on the left side, you're seeing kind of like a bunch of splashes of origins and classes. That is gonna be a big difference that you see. Before it was 8 brawlers, right? Or 9 Elderwood, or 9 Warlord. Now you're really going to see a lot of people splitting synergies exactly like this. We might even go back to a time of Blunder comps where it's a bunch of small synergies, the 2-2-2-2-2 splashes that tend to reign supreme, as we've seen Kale lose, I think, most of the time at this point. But we shall see as the game gets longer. Is Olaf or other carries just that much stronger now?
Yeah, I don't know how much of this I want to assign to Kale and how much I want to assign to the team comp surrounding Kale. But if we look at the units here, like, the good stuff is there. Like, this is for the most part the Kale comp. Our Sejuani's level 2. All of our executioners are level 2. We have the Zeeks and the Cup empowering Kale. So it feels like this is mostly where we want to be, and still sitting on 4 divine. With Kale comps, you either want to have 2 divine, 4 divine. You don't want to go overboard on it. Even with some changes to the divine trait, I still think that's the case. I still think you prefer to set up that way, but this is generally what I want my Kale comps to look like, and it's not really shining right now. We're going to see Gangly take on Yiggles here, both at pretty precarious life totals. This could be it for either player.
Half the HP gone just from one Aatrox cast, just like a normal cast when it came to getting that Kale out of the corner. But the rest of the team around that Aatrox unable to do anything about it, as Yiggles was going to get eliminated in 6th place. So Gangly going to be able to potentially compete for this top 4. MrMeeSeeks has not lost literally since we left his POV. So part of me is like, let's not go back.
Yeah, we definitely cursed MeeSeeks early on.
Yeah, it's kind of like a thing in TFT. I don't know if you've noticed. No one hits when they're being watched on stream, right? No one wins, and the second we leave them, you'll see the 3-star thing pop up. It's kind of a thing. But MrMeeSeeks and Contrado, 2 people that are coming back from last week in the top 2, Infernix, a former champion, in the top 3, Tian and Gangly, both people who have been here before, right, competing for that top 4 as well. As a Kindred 3, the unit not going to be, I think, the unit pretty impactful. Good unit, but more so the increase in stats on those items, that Zeeks and those chalices.
Yeah, love to see you get your support unit up to a ability where it can have some impact on the game. I can't recall how big the scaling is for the Zeeks and the Cup. I know it's sizable on Locket. Does it scale off levels based on Zeeks and Cup as well?
Maybe I'm just like applying it. I'm pretty sure they do. We can check though. But
Okay.
regardless, a tier 3 kindred is going to be able to take at least one unit away, which it
Oh,
does just then.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Ooh. Look at this Kale start to pop off now. Is it going to be able to continue attacking? I mean, the thing is it's CC, right? And if this set gets to her, oh my goodness, that's what
Shut
TFT
down.
is, my friends. He was running right to her face, but stuck the hand out and said, "Stop. In the name of love, set. You are going down."
Kale very happy to have the Giant Slayer as Set rushed at her, able to take it down before he was able to get that cast off.
And so Kale helps Gingley get to the top 4 right now. And the thing about Kale, it really just seems like really good against certain comps, not that great against other comps right now. It's a little bit more counterable. Isn't the one size fits all kind of shoe that it was in the last patch, which is, oh, I've got 3 bows? I'm just going to go Kale, right? A little later. Now you're going to really have to think about it. We'll see if this Aatrox is going to be able to help out. Should pull the Sand Soldier or die. As well
Either
as
one.
they actually get to the Kale in the back line. It's going to be Samira versus Kale, and this is looking like a little bit of deja vu. This time, though, Gingley's going to get the other end of that with a loss.
Very, very close fight there. Kale only needed maybe 1 or 2 more auto attacks to pull that out in Gangley's favor. But as it stands, able to keep Gangley alive. So important. It was able to take out as many units as it did.
Look at all these
Concentrado's
team comps.
comp is really interesting. A Nico comp. And Nico didn't quite get buffed, didn't quite get nerfed, falls under the adjustments categories on this patch. Basically, all of the Fabled units made a little bit stronger when they don't have the Fabled synergy. But I believe Nico 3 specifically was what was toned down a bit. So I'm interested to see how this champ plays in this comp from Concentrado.
And we're going to be able to see it onto the other side. The Nika ult is already out, and, you know, it could have been a little bit more impressive, to be honest with you. The Shen, though, showing exactly why Shen is such a good unit, and completely just dodges out of the way like a professional Summoner's Rift player. That Shen's never on my team.
Like a ninja.
Yeah, because I'm that Shen, and I'm only in the river. So not that great myself, but that Shen doing a lot of work during that round. And I think sometimes you kind of miss the effect that Shen has because you kind of look at him as just in the depth unit, I think sometimes, and a mystic unit. But that taunt is going to turn people away, and turn speed is kind of a thing here, right? Yet they have to come back around and target somebody, and Shen will delay that departure of the train. The other thing that I've actually been seeing a lot of is putting Azir next to Kale recently, so that Azir continues to ult and no one can actually get to the Kale. That's something that I'm actually really intrigued. Oh, we're seeing it right here with Gangley. So that ultimate is a lot like Teemo Shrooms from last set. It slows you down, but it takes time to get back to your original hex and spot for those units. And Kale is going to do a lot of damage to you because of that. So the synergy between Aatrox and Kale actually very, very high.
Yeah, there's a lot of displacement that's so important to protecting a Kale, and you have to look for unique ways to do it because I think the inherent comp doesn't have too much of it. Like, you're a little bit relying on the adept buff to really slow down your opponent's aggression, but that's not enough. You need some secondary way to do so. And seeing people pick up Azir has been really cool.
And we're going to see Gingley go down in 3rd place. It's 42-2 right now. And Phoenix has a lot of work to do, but yeah, go ahead.
Look at what MeeSeeks has put together here. This is an impressive looking comp. A lot of value in the 4-cost slot. You've seen Sejuani now getting updated. We have Aatrox online, plenty of 5 costs. This looks like the scariest comp, and you can understand exactly why MeeSeeks sitting in 1st place right now. Going to be taking on this Darius. Picked up Gunblade, Rabadon's Deathcap, and D-Claw. Is that enough to fight through these pretty beefy frontliners and a very, very dangerous Olaf?
Well, I mean, if I'm a Darius and I see a Set and a Lee Sin on the other side, I am feeling, or on your team, I'm feeling pretty good. So we'll see. The backline, though, with that Sivir is going to help everyone get their attack speed up, and I think that's going to be the only saving grace, as MrMeeSeeks is looking pretty good. Has to
Yeah, here
take
comes
through and go
Olaf.
down this set. If this set ults, has Zillion ult on, I believe. Interesting. And so we do get MrMeeSeeks as the victor here. Doesn't even need the item
Yeah,
remover. It's going to do it the old-fashioned way with the old school little legend, the water sprite, the river sprite. Bryan, what's your kind of take of everything we just saw? 4 different comps in the top 4 there.
I think we saw exactly what this patch was intended to accomplish. We didn't see any hard re-rolling. We saw a lot of diversity in the chosens and the carries. And I think we saw our players adapt throughout the game. Somebody like MeeSeeks, we started watching from their perspective, started with the Elise chosen, got out of that when it made sense to do so, found a Morgana, built a little bit of a strange comp around it. You don't typically see, 2 Enlighteners, 2 Siphoners, 3 Slayers, and the whole mishmash of stats that we saw there. But I think that's what the end games are going to look like on this patch a lot more diversity, a lot more creativity. And keep an eye on Olaf. There's an Olaf win. Olaf was the scourge of the PBE, as I mentioned. Didn't quite shine on live, but I think the Slayer buffs have a chance to really put Olaf back into the top tier of carries.
All right, let's take a look at our points. 10 points for first place, and that's going to go to MrMeeSeeks. Infernix is going to go 8, Gangly 7. That's actually a very good result for Gangly, who's very new at this. Contrado, who was our Enlightened player last week, in 4th place. We got T at 4, Yiggles at 3, Laplace at 2, and itsDinoDan at 1. But the way that lobby went, it was actually pretty close from 3rd and below. So anything can really happen. But MrMeeSeeks should feel very good about the fact that they're continuing to find success. And that's exactly what I told you, Bryan, before this game today, which was what I need to see from MrMeeSeeks is, okay, we did good last week. We got to do good again. Right? Like, we can't just do, a shooting star type of situation where it was that one time, right, that we found that success. And consistency is what's going to put you into the upper echelon of TFT players. MrMeeSeeks and Fernix, both, I think, on the brink of getting there, but Fight Night Racing is going to be how they end up doing it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. MeeSeeks, of course, the champion last week. And there's this thing that happens in competitive gaming, and it's been rare throughout my competitive gaming career, but it has happened from time to time where you just feel like you can't lose. Like everything's going right. You're making the move at exactly the right time that you need to make. And you just start getting this confidence about you where you say, you know what, I'm at the top of my game right now. I'm ready to take it to the next level. And if MeeSeeks puts together another run here this week, could be very much in the process of doing that.
I would be really, really cool. I'd love to see Infernix continue on their win streak as well. If you're wondering why some streamers get featured a little bit more often, it usually has something to do with the quality of that stream. So please, friends, if you want to follow some of these streamers, if you hover your mouse over the screen, you're going to be able to see all of us, I believe, on there, and you're going to be able to follow all of us as well if you're curious about any specific players. But, now that housekeeping is done, we have seen a couple of these lobbies. As we're actually in our next lobby already, we did not see a single reroll comp that entire time, I believe. So there was no duelists, no warlords, no brawlers, no elderwoods. It was all flexibility the entire time. And so part of me is curious. I'd love to see a standard reroll duelist comp against that Olaf comp and kind of see where they clash in terms of power level now. Are duelists just going to peak in power too soon, right, and then lose later on? That's kind of like my question about some of these old comps like duelists that have actually always been pretty good in terms of top 4 potential.
No, I've got the same questions, Boop, and I want to offer an opinion because that's what we're here for. We're here to analyze these things, but I just don't know right now. I don't know how duelists are going to stack up. When I look at the patch notes, theoretically, I think those comps are going to struggle against the more refined comps like we saw win the lobby there. But nobody really attempted it there. So things on paper don't always apply, and you need to see how things play out. We'll see if anyone is brave enough this lobby to go ahead and get into one of those reroll comps, be it duelists, be it warlords, be it, you mentioned elderwoods. There's so many different paths you can take. And I'm very curious if we see any of that up and down team building.
And the other thing that I'm also really intrigued by when it comes to this particular patch are some of the other splashes. Like, did Spirit get stronger because ninjas maybe got stronger, right? Those are the types of equations and permutations that I'm really thinking about, and that's what's really cool about this particular set. Is again, you're presented with fork in the road situations almost every turn after round 4-1, right? It's what am I going to do every single round, and that type of choice is really good for some people and really bad for others. And so it's really gonna, I think, affect where some people on the ladder are based on their particular play styles. As we're gonna go ahead and see an Italy get 2-starred. It was offered to us. Curious to see where the rest of this is gonna go, because another comp that we never really saw. One of the only mono comps that we didn't see were sharpshooters. So we'll curious to see again if we're gonna see some of them here, maybe in the 4 and 6 package, because we never really saw the 6 sharpshooter comp.
No, extremely rare that you would go that far with sharpshooters. And I want to draw your attention to what's happening here, Boop. In the shop, Fiora chosen, 2 Fioras already on the bench. It looks like we're letting this go by. Obviously, there's still time to adjust, but Fiora, recipient of some big nerfs on this patch, just in terms of her mana being increased. That's tough for Fiora, because when Fiora really shined, and on the last patch, Fiora shined. Fiora might have actually been the best chosen. I think there's a very good case to be made for that, even if it didn't get the same headlines as some of the other champs. But here, looks like we're convinced that these nerfs are just too much, and it doesn't behoove us to go down this road with Fiora.
Did you see how little damage that spear did to that Tahm Kench? Like, that was the nerf.
Oh,
it was so small. It was so little.
If you're on top of Nidalee, you're not doing damage anymore. It doesn't happen. The spears basically bounce off. Nidalee was changed so that the increase in damage from range is greater than it was, but the base damage is much smaller. So any champion which is standing within close proximity to Nidalee just isn't going to push damage anymore. It doesn't happen.
I think there is a little bit of an argument to build a little bit more AP on her. That will help some of that up close damage and mitigate some of that loss, but it's not going to be anywhere close as it was, because basically if you had a Nidalee 1v1ing 80% of the roster, that Nidalee was going to win. And so now it speaks to her thematics a little bit more too, as on Summoner's Rift, that's also the case. The longer the spear goes, right, the more damage it does, and you're not really seeing, unless she transforms, that auto attack based type of champion. With here in TFT with the Giant Slayer Shojins, a lot of that kind of damage going on at once. There was no counterplay to the champion. So if you get close to her, just like with Kale, right? If you get within 1 hex of Kale, if your numbers are even, you're probably going to win that round, right? Now it's the same for Nidalee. And I think right now I'm happy with what I'm seeing in terms of where Nidalee is at. Was able to take down someone earlier, kill 2 units. It's just, instead of that monster that Nidalee was, it's definitely more of a, 1 cost unit that you can choose to tier 3 if you so happen to fall into that, right? But you're not forced to anymore.
That's a great way of putting it. You want your 1 cost to do something. You don't want them to completely take over the game. And Nidalee previously was taking over games. But you saw when the Darius was up in Nidalee's face there, no items on Darius, it took 100 damage from a spear. And if you got hit with spears in the last patch, and you did, we all did, we were taking plenty of spears to the face, you took a lot more than 100 damage.
Yep, even, a hex away, 2 hexes away, that Tahm Kench not really doing anything. And it's potentially going to be the fact that we're running Cultist as to why we're winning here. And that has nothing to do with the Nidalee, right? The Nidalee is going to end up top fragging, but that number is much lower than it would have been last patch.
Oh, yeah.
So enough about Nidalee. So what does kind of the leveling off of Nidalee create openings for in terms of Warlords or potential other comps if you do start with that Nidalee?
Well, on the Warlord front, I think Cat also saw some nerfs. The Warlord trait saw some nerfs, but so small sample size, 1 game. Like I said, I had time to play today. It was a Cat game. Cat felt fine, still blowing up opposing units, still could carry with it. If you get your itemization right, Cat feels entirely capable of being the Warlord flag bearer, but also I think Tryndamere is interesting on this patch for a few reasons. There's the chosen mechanic change and the fact that you're more often going to be re-rolling your Warlord chosen when you get to that late stages. In most cases, you would just stay pat with your Warlord chosen. You would hang on to your Nidalee, hang on to your Garen, because your whole comp was so reliant on getting that extra trait buff. you just couldn't afford to take the chance of not finding an additional warlord. Now I think you can bear the chance a little bit more, and I think Tryndamere maybe as a carry for warlords might have a chance.
I saw that in the patch notes too. Some good kind of like a quality of life buff
Quality of life,
situation
yes.
where I believe the wording is he's going to look for a wider area of people or something like that. So the targeting is going to be a little bit smoother. And any changes like that are usually like quality of life buffs, right? So we haven't seen it yet because I don't think we've seen Duelist. We've seen the Slayer package. So if you're going Slayer, Olaf is going to be your primary carry, potentially with Zed or Tryndamere as your secondary carry. So you're not really going to see it there. But on a Duelist comp, especially with Yasuo being very much nerfed with his ultimate, that could definitely be an option because those 3 auto attacks after that spin hit like a truck and can take most of the roster out just with 3 auto attacks there, even at tier 1.
Yeah, I think all of these very linear comps are going to have to answer this question of who is my carry now, because it can't really be the 1-cost units reliably. It can't be Fiora, it can't be Yasuo. And previously, Tryndamere got so little respect because why would you bother? It just didn't make any sense. Like, why would you invest resources into Tryndamere when you have these 1-cost carries that you can reliably roll for 3-star basically every game with no problems whatsoever? So even if Tryndamere was good, we probably wouldn't have known about it just in terms of economics. There's no reason to try and push that route. Now you at least are incentivized to explore that a little bit more. And in my first pass, it felt pretty good.
I think this is actually going to be a pretty common story when it comes to 4.75 is these units that might have not actually been bad, right? Were just getting overlooked. I think Aatrox is my number 1 unit for that. Yuumi is another unit I think is very strong that might start really shining in some of these particular metas because the option to go Tryndamere, like you said, is a lot more viable. Right? Say you're not hitting your Olaf. You have 1 Olaf that you've already 2-starred your Tryndamere, right? Before you might force the Olaf, but now you can be like, okay, let me adjust real quick. Let me move to the Tryndamere. If I pick up this Olaf, I can think about it then, but now I gotta commit. And I think those are the types of decisions that we're seeing more often as we're looking over at T now, who is in 5th place at 82 HP, leaving some gold on the board, will be able to make 40 gold. So nothing to worry about. It's now, are we going to make it to 50 gold? As we've got some good 4-cost units, but everything at tier 1.
Yeah, we're a fortune comp again. Multiple fortune comps on the board here. I believe it was Gangly also playing fortune, putting together a little loss streak. But here we see T's comp, and it is just a solid looking fortune comp. A lot of 4-cost units making their way to the store for some reason. I'm assuming they came from a package because we just hit level 5 now. So it's not even possible those 4-cost units are just naturally popping up in the store, I guess.
And so we're going to continue on our fortune go around after this NPC round for fortune. I think you're right. I think one of the first things you said today was I actually expect more people to play fortune. And we've definitely seen that so far. At least 50% of the, out of the last 2 lobbies, I believe last lobby, there were 2 or 3 people running fortune. This lobby, at least 2, Gangly being one of them, T being the other. We had a fortune 6 player in Infernix last lobby. So 3 people actually running fortune last lobby. And I really think it really boils down to what we talked about earlier, which is it's not how we're getting into these comps that's the question anymore, right? It's not how we're going to get 9 warlords, it's how we're getting out of them. Right? How are we going to get out of cultists? How are we going to get out of fortune? And that's always been, I feel like, the skill cap part of this game, and we're definitely seeing that right here and right now. Is I don't think some of these players have adjusted personally, where they have to just kind of chill out and wait sometimes, right? And that can be really hard, especially for players like me, where I love rolling, like not
little
as a
gambling,
strategy,
yeah,
as,
I feel you.
yeah, but as a compulsion. Right, so I like to say that I'm a flexible player that likes to roll. That doesn't really happen, but T now is going to have to figure out a way to get out of fortune in some way, and we're keeping spirit. Right, we have the Aatrox now, and you're really just seeing best in slot, not items, but champs right now, where we're not necessarily putting together a bunch of synergies, but we have some good units on the board right now. Good example is that Pike just kind of chilling.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to push. Yeah, here we are, 6 fortune. I had a feeling based on these units we were accumulating that this is what our goal was. And I'll be honest with you, this is a decent looking 6 fortune comp. Like, I think that it's possible for T to steal some rounds here and really get an item edge on everyone else.
It's crazy. We've seen 2 6 fortune gamers today, and I don't think we've ever seen a 6 fortune gamer at Fight Night Rising
Right.
ever.
No, it was almost a meme to play 6 fortune.
Yeah, and it's like, if you want to do it, if you win, you could totally win a lobby, so you can tell your friends that you won a Fortune 6 game. But that's pretty much how viable it was, right? It was for the lulls. But now
Agreed.
the fact that Infernix played it, got second in the last lobby, and we're seeing T play it right now. It's hard to kind of gauge where Fortune players are because the point is to lose, right? So Gangly did just cash out on that last Fortune round. So Gangly's going to be looking to be pretty strong, but that's actually a pretty early Fortune payout. You usually want to wait a little while longer, as our top 2 from last lobby are in the bottom 4 right now.
Yeah, it looks like T's going to go ahead and deploy that cup for this round. So maybe looking to add a little loss total to the last round and inflate that fortune payout a little bit. But when it comes to 6 fortune, I think you can just win, honestly. I don't think you need to try and streak. I think the payout being adjusted for 6 fortune is enough where you just want to get W's on the board, preserve your life total, and then transition with your new items into a different comp fairly early on. So let's see if T agrees if they want to play it differently.
That Aatrox damage is nuts. Anyway,
it's big damage.
It's huge. It is a lot of damage. Not enough to like win the round, obviously, but I mean, almost all the damage that you see on the board right now is actually from that Aatrox. Did 1 cast and top fragged on that round, I believe, for T. So it's really weird because, like you said, in Fortune 6, winning is totally fine, right? But and you have some pretty good units. Sejuani, good unit. Aatrox, good unit. So we're definitely going to be able to rock, paper, scissors a round off of somebody, right? Say we go up against Gangly, or someone like MrMeeSeeks on the bottom of the lobby. We might be able to fish for a win. The other thing that's going to be pretty tough is it seems like Darius and Annie, in terms of people contesting them, much higher than before. Yeah. Specifically Darius, and the fact that we're seeing him on some Slayer comps. Darius 3 carry last lobby, and with Mage and Fortune being pretty popular, the Annie pickups have actually almost, I've seen 3-4 people pick up Annie so far, and just generally a good tank anyway.
Yeah, seems to be rising in priority pretty quickly. So we'll have to see how that influences the availability here. The other tough thing about 6 Fortune too is that we talked about transitioning out of Fortune comps, and we're mostly talking about doing that in the context of 3 Fortune. When it comes to 6 Fortune, it's tough. It's really tough to put together your new comp on the fly and figure out exactly what you're supposed to do, because you're often extremely under the gun. You're extremely pressured because your life total has gotten so low, and you don't really have a clear path forward. We see like a weird smattering of synergies right now, really just the Fortune and Vanguard being deployed for this round. It was Assassin's last round. Lee Sin in the mix somehow. So strange shape to T's team right now. But this fight looking okay to start with.
Yeah, looking okay. That Jeweled Gauntlet on that Aatrox doing a lot of damage. I'm loving this new version of Aatrox. It's so satisfying. I don't know why, but I love it. And
look at this. I think we're in line for a W here. Just Annie versus Nidalee.
100 extra damage, though. Whoever ults first will win, and it's going to be that Annie. So let's see what a 6 Fortune payout looks like, friends. We've never seen it before. And so let's go ahead and see our first ever 6 Fortune payout. We got a couple of units. Nice. That's actually going to fill out item potential really well with that needlessly large rod. But in terms of units, I've always felt that with Fortune 6 kind of depends how you go, right, with the units it gives you. But we didn't get any of that direction this time around. So I say let's keep going.
I think that T agrees with you. Nobody leaving the comp right now. Let's see if there's any item upgrades to be had. But that was like a fairly convincing fight. It really wasn't bad in terms of a Fortune comp. They were able to contest. And you see this Aatrox starting to pick up some items. I guess T saw the damage and was like, yeah, this probably is where I want to be as far as a carry goes.
841 damage crit, friends, on that Aatrox. You get that Aatrox early, right? Say you hit that Aatrox at like level 6. That Aatrox can carry you through those rounds, is what I'm seeing right now. Plus, it has pretty much eliminated Kales from the corner, right? Because if there's gonna be more Aatrox, you're gonna have to think about who you put in the corner, right? Which is gonna equal Azir becoming more popular. Do you see how like like friends at home, like that's how the meta changes, right? That's how we adjust, and so we're seeing a lot of that adjustment right now. We actually have another Cultist comp. Pretty much everything we've seen today has been brand new, which is really really cool.
It's super refreshing. I wasn't as staunch of a critic of the last patch as some people were. I think that you could find things to love about it if you worked hard. Granted, you had to really search for it. But this is certainly a refreshing change of pace right now, seeing really, really interesting stuff coming out of the early rounds here.
God, I don't know why this Aatrox gets me so excited. It is just
It's flashy. It's like a big explosion of damage. You love to see really explosive effects on the TFT battlefield.
And I loved Blitzcrank when Blitzcrank was in the meta. We get the Blitzcrank hook now, but it forced people to really consider their positioning. And again,
Sure.
if Aatrox is meta, right, you're really going to have to sacrifice a Sand Soldier in the corner, right? You're going to have to do something or just have one of those, I remember putting like 1-cost Veins in the corner so Blitzcrank could pull them instead just as a meat shield, right? So that could definitely be the case here. And the other thing that we're seeing is item consolidation being a little lackluster right now for a DinoDan, but the straight power of 6 cultists seems to be enough to where we can be a little bit more flexible with the items. And so my question to you, because this is something like my friends and I talk about a lot, is when you see items on the bench like this, right? When you see potential good items, for example, right, and you see them on the bench and you actually see them winning, are we actually doing everything that we can, or would you rather see this stuff kind of stay on the bench until we have a little bit more direction?
I think if I were in DinoDan's seat right now, I don't know that I would go as far as wanting to deploy all of these items, but 100% I would be putting a Runaan's Hurricane on my Callista. I think like you already have 2 items invested. They're 2 very strong items for Callista. And to me, it really feels like Callista unlocks when you put the Runaan's on. Now, if you're not doing that, I'm assuming you're saying, actually, it's RFC I want here, which I respect. There's a reason to go that route instead. But I think the quality of this team, given how far along the duelist path we are right now, I think we're going to keep pushing to 9. I don't really see another shape for this team. The only really other indication we're looking at is a lone Tryndamere and a lone Nunu, and that doesn't really say, we want to go this direction. So unless you're really into the idea that Tryndamere could potentially be a carry, I mean, you see a sword floating on the Tryndamere, so there's some suggestion towards that. But I think I would like to see a little bit more Callista itemization right now. But the idea of preserving those choices as late in the game, especially where you don't yet have your path defined, it makes sense. And it's all give and take. It's all balance. And especially with a new patch, you need to really figure out when you have to invest in these items.
We have 2 players playing 6 cultists right now. DinoDan, one of them, Gangly putting up another pipe. Sold one earlier, but this is like a really unfortunate situation for DinoDan because this is a great early game comp. Right? Like, this is why DinoDan is at 44 HP and not, 20 HP, right? Because what the comp that they are running is a very good early game comp, but only 2-star unit was your chosen, right? Callista, the only thing that's really going to have any sort of carry potential right now, because you're not itemizing your Nunu, right? Who's literally not adding to anything in terms of origins or synergies right now, right? So I agree with you. Let's go ahead and put some stuff on this Callista. We might be okay with losing, as if we get to pick first, we can definitely get that RFC. Maybe that's what we're waiting for. It looks like it might happen depending on how good this Supreme Overlord is, but RFC Lee Sin is this is why I don't like RFC Lee Sin, by the way. If I've ever talked about it before, this exact situation.
Just where it continues to kick into the corner repeatedly.
Yeah, and they just walk back, right? Because you don't have to be next to them because your body is what's blocking them from walking away without the RFC. It's going to keep Lee Sin safer, but at that point, like, I think even build just like Jewel Gauntlet, you're going to hope for damage more so than anything else. Maybe you keep them distracted, but I don't know, man. RFC on Lee Sin seems to be like a coin flip in terms of value.
So I do believe that Dan was looking for that bow to make RFC. You saw him clicking in that direction when it passed. So now going to have to revisit that plan on the fly. Are we going to make this third Calista item not all that much HP to give anymore? Only 37 HP left, sitting in 6th place right now in this lobby is itsDinoDan.
The other thing that we could maybe do is put all of those items on someone and roll the dice on that reforger, right? and see what direction that gives us. But we're not going to do that. I actually like reforging singular items. I think that gives you a little bit more flexibility. So if you guys, guys, gals, and pals at home, right? When do I reforge? Well, sometimes if you have a sword and you want to make a Zeeks, but you have a tier, just reforge the tier and hope for the belt, right? That's going to be a little bit better for you. Plus, item components are way more flexible than completed items, right? If you do a completed item, you're stuck with it. With an item component, you might be able to do something else with it, and I think that's another benefit of that particular strategy. But looking over at this, Lee Sin, Annie, Katarina, we're still running those fortunes on T's side, but this Olaf is crushing it right now. Best in slot items. That Olaf is going to compete. It seems like MeeSeeks is going to be forcing Olaf probably the majority of today, as I would say that's probably the comp a lot of people were talking about coming into this particular patch, was Olaf was going to be pretty strong.
Yeah, we came just in time for the transition away from the cultists, and now we're looking at another Olaf comp, second time in a row, and all the pieces appear to be here. A lot of strong units. You see the Morgana again in this comp, looking to potentially add Siphoner at some point. We already have Slayer online with the addition of Samira, so this already looks like a very strong place to be. Also picking up that Dragon Soul buff for Olaf as well, positioning, so hopefully it'll pick that up and be able to really amplify the damage output.
If I could ask more one thing, just just real quick, is when you hit 6 Slayer or 9 Slayer, I would love to hear like a guitar riff, like to tell you that you've done it. Just feels
a little Rain
right.
and Blood from Slayer.
Yeah,
exactly. Very, very
exactly
appropriate.
I think that would be a really good quality of life change. What do you think? Sound effects.
Oh, anytime we're adding more metal, to the game, I'm absolutely in. That's my jam right there.
How cool would it be to be able to get 9 Slayer, by the way? Anyway, could you imagine what that would be like? I do that on occasion.
I cannot.
Like putting myself in more shoes, like if my assignment was to make like a Dragon Soul 12, right? Like what that would be and what those numbers are. It's a really fun little thought experiment for everyone at home to attempt, and it's hard. it's really hard to think of it. But it's definitely fun to do. I'm really afraid for this lobby in terms of this Olaf, though. It is very strong.
I agree with you, and a decent Samira item available as well if we want to do maybe some Last Whisper on Samira, or looks like that's the direction we are heading. So as that Samira gets more powerful, you get your secondary carry online. The support pieces look pretty good here. We have, a Zilean, which doesn't really fit with the comp, but Zilean is my favorite 5 cost that doesn't really have traits in common with the rest of your team. I'm very willing to just run it out there and let it do its thing. So happy to see that. And I think we're probably headed to adding Siphoner to this comp at some point to really let that lifesteal shine on the Olaf.
And we're running, just a Sejuani in the front line. This is calling back to set 4, right? Like just Sejuani is a solid unit, and there really wasn't that much CC in the last couple patches, right? And Sejuani now is back, and that's going to make things like this QSS on the Kayle that much more valuable. And the Kayle is going to be targeted by the Tristana. I don't really see this Kayle winning out in the end, but if no one pays attention, there it is, and we finally get that Dragon Soul proc to go down. Dragon Soul did get nerfed. It was one of the final changes in the patch. Originally, I don't believe it was going to get touched, and then did get a little bit of a nerf because it was a little too strong before getting onto live. But, we actually haven't seen anyone commit to Dragon Souls just in general today. I'm curious to see if we're going to see that as we pick up a second Zilean. And so, yeah, what's your take on the Fortune Chosen in the front line that's not really adding anything other than Vanguard?
Look, when I study the LoL chess accounts for these players that we watch and players at the top of the ladder, often the most played champion is Sejuani. her ability to change a fight to just be this huge. And look, as we scroll through and you just see Sejuani after Sejuani making my point, that AoE stun is so impactful to fights. It's almost like a better adept in some ways. Like, it just slows down the pace. It lets your important units get online. It lets your Olaf pick up stacks for the Death Blade. It lets Zillion cast all these little things which have very huge impacts on the fight, but need time to get going. I think having Sejuani lets that happen. And you see, willing to take just a completely useless fortune trait in order to have a level 2 Sejuani in the comp right now.
Because everyone actually having a hard time getting their Sejuani to level 2 right now. And in terms of units being contested more so than before, that's definitely one of them that we've seen so far today. As MrMeeSeeks playing very well in terms of understanding where their particular power levels are going to be. Something that Crowan and I have talked about is how TFT is kind of like music, right? There's downbeats, there's particular sections that you need to get to in order to be successful. And you have to play with a certain kind of technique. And MrMeeSeeks understands where all of those musical moments are in this particular lobby right now, and the last lobby. I've been really enjoying this Olaf pick. As we have a Rabadon's Ionic Spark Aatrox. Ionic Spark on Aatrox is something that I assumed would be. And I would like to build Aatrox like Riven back in some of the old sets. Like, I think that would be really good. But as of right now, this Olaf, I think, is what's winning out on this board. Is a second Nico comp now for Contrado, I believe.
Yeah, twice in a row, and Nico dropping some damage there. Not going to be enough to take down the Olaf, but that was some serious burst.
I've not seen 3 people get their GA/Zillion proc at the same exact time like that. That was a lot of damage, and unfortunately still wasn't enough to win out that game. I think this Trap Claw, knowing with all of this Sejuani on the field and the Zephyrs that are about to pop out, I think the Trap Claw is actually a pretty good take. I can see someone taking that either as like a consolatory type of item, as MrMeeSeeks was thinking about it for a time. MrMeeSeeks doing, one of my friends does this. They don't really care what item they get unless they steal someone else's item. And it's a legitimate strategy. It's a legitimate strategy, and I appreciate it. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, I think MeeSeeks had their eye on the IE for sure, just to really put that Samira over the edge and get basically perfect itemization, but going to be pretty happy with a second Hodge. Let's see if that heads right over to Samira. It does, of course. Itemize that Samira, she'll pay you back tenfold.
itsDinoDan having a rough time again as our 6th fortune player actually bombs out in 8th place. itsDinoDan now 5 HP. Elimination station right now for them, as Laplace in first place, 37 HP. So this lobby is, again, very close as we get a executioner comp here for Laplace. We saw Gangly play something very similar last time and got a 3rd place.
Yeah, another Kale comp. On the other side, we see a pretty well itemized Tristana, or excuse me, Tryndamere on the other side. Let's see how that fares against this Kale.
Dude, the way it spun to the end there was hilarious. I loved it, and the more I can see that, the better. As Laplace, gonna feel good about that. I'm not gonna feel good about that right now. MrMeeSeeks still on fire. Gangly as well. Intrigued to see what they're running. Yiggles was on top of the leaderboard this whole time, and she's having a little bit of a hard time closing out these lobbies, which was exactly what happened last week. Contrado having a little bit of a hard time, as I think his enlightened kind of one-tricking isn't going to be as successful, but a Nautilus 3 with buffs, though, is potentially going to be a top 4 situation.
Yeah, I love Nautilus 3. What a absolute tank of a unit. Feels almost unkillable sometimes. Only holding Thief's Gloves, so going to be a little bit role dependent. Really want to hit some good items on that Nautilus, but did pretty well on this roll. Sunfire Cape, Gargoyle Stoneplate. Gargoyle Stoneplate, of course, buffed on this patch as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Gargoyle Stoneplate. Imagine if Fiora was still the old Fiora with that item. That'd be nuts. But 30 HP at the top of the leaderboard, only 15 away from the bottom. So again, anyone can win, anyone can lose here. Contrado trying their best, but is going to be taken down by the Kale, level 9, right? Laplace is at level 9. It seems like most of the rest of the lobby is at level 8. So we do have a man advantage. But, you know, this is something that we talked about earlier with Laplace too. Very quietly is able to make it to the end of these lobbies and gather a lot of strength. And this team comp is looking pretty scary right now.
I agree with you. Good looking Kale comp. You know, still some questions about where Kale falls on this patch, but if this is how you want to do it, It looks like the classic Kale comp. We've got our adepts ready to go. Our chosen happens to be Shen here. Second time we've seen a chosen Shen, but I think that's a good solid chosen. You get a huge buff to Mystic. And of course, we do know there is the Nico comp, so you're going to love to have 4 Mystic against that. Maybe doesn't shine as much as some of the other comps in the lobby, but still, I'm a big fan of just Shen adding so much utility with so little cost. You don't have to itemize your Shen to get a lot out of it.
And so, hey, dude, this is exactly what we talked about in terms of if we were to see a Tryndamere carry, right? It would be if someone else already had the Olaf, right, and we didn't really have the right items, we would put Tryndamere potentially as the primary until the Samira comes through, and that's exactly what we see here. So this is the closest to a Tryndamere carry that we're going to get all day today. We're going to leave a naked sword up, but the Hodge plus Titan's Resolve is actually really cool because those 3 auto attacks after the spin are guaranteed stacks on that Titan's Resolve.
Right. Yeah, I think Titans is a nice defensive item for the Tryndamere, but it's going to be the Samira who really has to do the lion's share of the work here.
The Tryndamere, though, in the backline, taking care of
Staying alive.
taking care of all of like the nefarious tanks and support types, and the Samira is doing the rest of the work. Was not able to get that ult off. This Vanguard 3, I don't know. Oh, was enough. The Vanguard's able to take Gangly down. That's a little frustrating. He seems pretty surprised by that too.
Yeah, if I was in Gangly's seat, I would make the exact same face. I think they were in a really good position in that fight, in their comp as well. The comp looked quite solid. Samira too, well itemized, but just not able to find that key win in that scenario.
Vanguard Nautilus. The whole point of that buff in the patch notes is we want Nautilus to be a non-fabled comps, right? But what that also means is Fabled got stronger as well. Nautilus 3 was always pretty frustrating. And so that's going to require maybe some of the lobby to get those giant slayers up, get some of that burn up so we can just start getting through that HP. As a duelist Zill in the backline is going to really create a lot of opportunity for Infernix to keep the team alive, and especially against comps like Samira where, you know, potentially things are going to go awry for the majority of your team. If your Zill's going to be able to ult, it's just going to be a little bit more of a reset than an actual loss.
Big win there for Infernix, and their team certainly seems online at this point, staying at 8, but well outclassing the 9 units we saw from Laplace Tales.
And so we have Mr.MeeSeeks going out in 4th place following that win in that last lobby. Contrado in 3rd place right now. Laplace in 2nd and Infernix in 1st. We're around 6-3, so we're probably going to go 2 or 3 more rounds. The player damage at this point is quite high. Laplace and Contrado only have 1 loss, and someone will be getting eliminated this round, Brian. Is it going to be our Mystic Fabled player, or is it going to be our Kale player? It's going to be tough with that Kale, but it seems the Executioner is a really great counter to that Nautilus. The Kale falls, though, so our secondary carry is going to be what brings us the victory if we get one. The Aatrox, though, has some other ideas. Do not count the Xayah out yet. That's a huge ult. But Zill is going to help keep the team alive, and Contrado will finish in at least 2nd place.
Nico looking pretty solid here in the early going. Not a comp I really had my eyes on coming into this patch, but maybe Concentrado looking to prove me wrong here.
Hopefully, because Nico is a lot of fun, and a lot of people just didn't play Fabled in that last round. It's Bubble Bubble Pop, the champion, you know, an old school StarCraft meme. If you guys remember that one, you know, great artist. Anyway, Yiggles is going to help us out here in terms of observing, because I believe Infernix and Contrada both have. Anyway, Infernix is on fire right now and is looking quite strong. Duelist Olaf, so that's going to compensate for the lack of built-in attack speed with some items.
Yeah, I think we're still looking pretty clearly at a Samira carry here, but you'd love to have some good secondary itemization on the Olaf. There's just a lot of things that have to be answered coming from Infernix, and I don't know if this Nico is going to find wide enough damage across all of these units to take care of them. Still alive and untouched, though.
Yeah, and has the Zill buff on them, and it's going to be Infernix taking the L. So we're going to go to 6-6 for our last round. 13 HP for Infernix. Contrado on fire, definitely in the advantageous spot right now when it comes to these two players. This Nautilus rolled some good items on that Thief's Glove, especially for a one-on-one situation. Getting a Zephyr in this particular instance is huge. He has two now.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 Zephyrs available for Concentrado, and that's going to really influence this fight. Also going to go ahead and 3-star that Yumi. You mentioned that as a champ you're a really big fan of, and I love it, particularly into this matchup. Going to be able to do some important healing from this explosive damage able to come out of the comp on Infernix's side.
Yeah, nice tag on the Shroud of Stillness, but it might not matter because of the double Zephyr. Some really good CC. Do you see just how much more CC there is in the game right now? So I
Yeah,
really believe things like QSS and Trapclaw are, and even Shroud of Stillness, because it keeps you from getting to that CC, are getting a lot more valuable. This Olaf doing a much better job this time, and that's why positioning is important, my friends,
absolutely.
as Olaf is going to take another lobby, 2 for 2 right now for Olaf lobbies for today's fight night.
Yeah, if you're an Olaf fan, you love to see it. If you're deathly afraid of Olaf, as I am, I still have some post-traumatic stress disorder from my time on the PBE, then maybe you're starting to raise an eyebrow a little bit. These Olafs have looked very strong, although they're sharing carry duties, and I really like to see that. It adds just a diversity to the gameplay. It's more fun when it's not just, oh, Kale's beating me again, or oh, Olaf's beating me again. Samira is still filling that role despite some nerfs. Basically, if you can get Samira safe enough to cast that ult, that's all you have to worry about. And maybe there will be a little bit more defensive itemization on Samira, but you should have been doing that anyway. So Samira really shined when she was well protected. And I think we'll continue to see even more defensive itemization as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might see the Vanguard spat come back for that Samira a little later on too, because it's all about maybe multiple ultimates rather than just one bursty one. So Infernix now going to take the lead in first place, 18 points. Mr.MeeSeeks will hold on a second at 16 and Contrado at 14. Following that is going to be Gangly, Laplace, Yiggles, TiaanTFT, who's had a little bit of a rough day today. This is a pretty separated lobby. Would you say the top 3 here have shown to be the top 3 so far? I think they're the only people that have top 4 in all the lobbies.
Yeah, it feels particularly like Concentrado is maybe onto something that the other players weren't expecting. I don't know how things broke to end up in Nico twice in a row, but it says something, especially given how rarely that champ was played on the previous patch. You know, that was kind of like a B tier, maybe C plus tier comp previously, and it feels like it's really ascending right now. And almost by exclusion. We talked a lot about how comps don't necessarily need to get better where every other comp is getting worse. There's just more space for these things to shine. Although Olaf has to be the headline champion of this day so far. It's looked really powerful to me. You got to be scared of those Slayer buffs right now.
And we haven't seen a Zed version of that comp yet either. And everyone loves playing Zed. There's always a Zed specialist. Asian Gamer 5 is probably the most well known. I actually saw it was climbing yesterday and made it to Masters again on Zed. So we might be seeing that come back. I think that Slayer bonus is very, very strong, especially at Slayer 6. Just ingrained lifesteal for your for your Slayer units is really good, especially for things like Olaf.
Yeah, and a lot of the knock against Slayer was you just had to play too many bad units to get there. You know, Darius was thought of as a pretty bad unit. Even Tryndamere, it had its fans, but I was particularly low on Tryndamere. I know a lot of other people felt the same way I did. But these units are accumulating buffs now. And it doesn't all come to fruition at once, but when you get buffed patch after patch after patch after patch, eventually you have your moment to shine. And what we've seen from Six Slayers, it feels like the lifesteal is back, feels like you can sustain now, and the damage output is looking really good as well.
I totally agree, and we'll see if Olaf is going to continue its domination today. Everything else below Olaf has been completely different throughout the day today, so lots of flexibility outside of that top spot so far. Will Infernix be able to finish out today and get that victory once again here at Fight Night, or will someone be able to take him down? We'll find out after the break. Welcome back, everybody. Brandon Boop here with Fight Night Rising. We've had a very interesting day today. Olaf, very successful, yes. Lots of flexibility, lots of differences. What's been some highlights for you, Brian?
Oh, I'm just enjoying a really fluid, flowing game of TFT we're seeing being played right now. It's very refreshing after the reroll meta. 0 reroll comps we have seen thus far. And I want to see if that can change. I don't think it will. I'm kind of concerned that the one costs have been nerfed into the ground. And I would like if that option is open a little bit, but maybe it'll just be the perfect scenario. All the stars will align. Your starting shop will have 6 Nasuses and you'll lock it and just be set for the rest of the game. So I want to see if somebody can find a way to get into a reroll comp.
You know, it's funny. It's kind of like whatever you prefer, and I love that TFT speaks to those specific styles. And we could talk about the styles as we look at the current leaderboard, because we've got 2 people absolutely crushing it right now, and that is going to be MrMeeSeeks and Infernix. MrMeeSeeks playing Olaf all the lobbies, but Infernix played Fortune 6, was doing a bunch of different kind of stuff, right? And that's something that I'm really intrigued by when it comes to their particular play style. It's someone who's forcing Olaf versus someone who is playing a couple different things, finding equal success.
Yeah, like I said, multiple ways you can go. And the other thing I'll point out is that we've seen Kale comps in every lobby, and Kale ate some nerfs. The traits have changed around, and I think we all expected Kale to be tuned down a bit. It does feel like it's not quite the world beater it was before, but still very present in the metagame. And if it's less contested, that makes it better. That's always the thing about TFT, is if you're not fighting for these units, they get better. So I'm keeping a close eye on how Kale performs as well.
Yeah, I think Kale might turn into, last set 4, the new Talon, right? Actually, at the very end of set 4 here in Giant Slayer, the very last lobby that anyone won was a Talon comp, right? And everyone was like, Talon is non-existent, Talon is this. But I mean, if you get Talon 3 is still pretty good, right? Just like you said earlier, you get Kale 3 is pretty good. You're gonna find success out of it. So let's not knock them until you try it. We have not seen, like you said, I just want to reiterate, a single reroll comp that's Duelist even, right? As I believe Duelist has always been the reroll comp that has been able to stand the test of the nerfs, right? And we really haven't seen, we've seen Duelists, but more as a splash than something that you go after. And just in general, I mean, I think we saw someone with 7 or 8 different traits and synergies at one point in their comp, and that's just not really something we saw last time. So flexibility is definitely here, some innovation, as well as a couple champs a lot more contested than they used to be.
Yeah, the fortune comps in general, we mentioned how many people are just looking to get that early economic edge by playing fortune. And we've seen it both in 3 fortune and 6 fortune forms. And 6 fortune was an absolute meme on the last patch. Like, you only did it when you kind of wanted to goof off a little bit, do something a little silly, but it feels almost viable just by exclusion of everything else. Everything else has gotten a little bit worse. So maybe you really can get 6 fortune together and get a few wins and increase your item density quite a bit.
All right, we're here in the 3rd lobby, friends. So I believe right now Infernix is in first place by 2 points, followed by MrMeeSeeks, who won the first lobby and then got 4th in the next. I could only imagine that Olaf becomes substantially more contested as the day goes on. So what's going to be the counter, right? What's the natural direction to go? Is it through items or is it through team comps, do you think?
So I want to pose something to you. I'm not going to suggest this is the counter, but it's interesting to me. Again, speaking about the weakening of all the other comps. So what gets stronger in that scenario? Well, just like flat defensive buffs get quite a bit stronger. And the flat defensive buff that sustained through these nerfs, Brawler went down, but Vanguard didn't. And we already saw an Aatrox come out, do just loads of damage. I wonder if there's an actual Vanguard comp, and you never see anyone push hard into Vanguard. You never see 6 Vanguards, 8 Vanguards, but could you? If everyone's focused on Olaf and Aatrox has this capacity to do extreme burst damage, is there a new comp there? I don't know. I think it's worth looking into at least.
Something that we saw last lobby too is a little bit of a counter was Shroud of Stillness, actually. So what we saw was Shroud of Stillness tag the Olaf, and the Sejuani was able to get the ult off in time to CC the Olaf. So, you know, it could be kind of like old school where heavy burst was how you dealt with it, right? Yeah, you do have that life steal, but if you're doing like KO damage to an Olaf, your Olaf might actually be able to life steal out of that. But if you're going up against Nico, for example, it's going to be a little harder because that damage is coming all at once. And so those are definitely, I think, some options that you can go. I do think Vanguard comps, specifically Vanguard spats, will start becoming a thing a little bit later on, because I just think the trait is so strong right now, always will be, especially since he gets magic damage defense now too.
Yeah, but just buff after buff after buff to Vanguards. And at some point, it's got to be enough, right? It's got to break through and make them viable. So I don't know if it's now, but I'm willing to look into it.
And I think a lot of people assume that if you are going to go Vanguard, you're going to go Mystics with it, but you don't have to anymore because you don't need the MR. You have it already.
Right.
So it opens up the possibility of going Vanguard Cultist to start and then going somewhere else a little later on, and then maybe even pushing the 6 Vanguard with a spat on Samira. That used to be very popular.
It's interesting. And the Vanguard units in and of themselves, we talked a little bit last round about how important Sejuani is to so many team comps right now. Also, I want to point out Concentrado has a Nico already, not wasting any time, just being like, yeah, I'm playing this champion. Let's pick it up. So I definitely want to watch this comp evolve and see if, again, Concentrado is looking to play Nico. But that could be a really smart meta call. Like you mentioned, burst damage looking quite good right now.
Yeah, burst damage and CC seems to be the name of the game right now. And so that's going to be like the Nautiluses, the Nautiluses, the Nautili, the, you know what I mean? So people who are going to be able to lock down. I mean, that last lobby, almost everyone had a QSS or Trapclaw, right? Because everyone was running that Sejuani. Was that a lobby-specific thing, or is that grander meta stuff? We will find out, as we have seen almost every one-cost chosen get passed up. It just feels very anti, like what we're used to. It's like, but it's always been this way. You know what I mean? And we've got to adjust now.
Yeah, you mentioned Duelist as the reroll role that has like always been here. I would put Diana in that same category. It certainly ebbs and flows, but throughout set 4, it feels like Diana has always had a place in the metagame, be it Moonlight or the new Spirit Assassin carries. And seeing it just passed up on is so strange to me. But I mean, the Chosen variant got nerfed. The actual baseline Diana unit got nerfed. So is it still viable for this champion to carry? Our players are saying no. I don't know yet. I'm going to do my due diligence, get some games in with Diana, but our players right now saying not even going to chance it.
Yep. Not even going to. I mean, the spirit package early on has always been pretty strong, and we actually haven't been seeing we've seen a couple spirit splashes because I believe that's like the units they got, right? But nothing that is like forcing the spirits right now, as we're getting closer to some Vanguards, Brian. When it comes to tier 2ing this, we could definitely leave that open. But let's do a little bit of education here, right? So let's look at the comp, and everyone at home, I want you to think about where this could go, right? We see 2 sharpshooters and 2 Vanguards right now, but what in terms of items do you see, and what in terms of champs do you see on where this could go? And let's see if Brian and you agree. Brian, what do you think?
Well, so unfortunately, I don't think you can do this in a vacuum, right? You have to consider that we're looking at Mr.MeeSeeks right now, and Mr.MeeSeeks played Olaf twice. Obviously has a strong predilection for the champion, and nothing about the units present in this comp right now really point me to saying, oh, this is an Olaf comp. I mean, maybe there's like the Dragon Soul overlap with Braum and Tristana, but that's really about it. However, you start to look at the items. You see there's a cloak there already, so we're pretty close to Runance. We already have the GA together. So if you're asking me to bet on what Mr.MeeSeeks is ultimately going to put together, I'm still betting Olaf here. I think just given the player, that's the direction I am inclined to look.
Yep, Slayer comps tend to lose early as well, and we've seen that with Mr.MeeSeeks, all 3 lobbies so far.
Second sword here.
Yep, we do have a Deathblade, and all we're going to need is a bow, and we're good in terms of Olaf items. So if you are an Olaf lover, friends, what I'm looking at right now is watch this man play, right? Watch Mr.MeeSeeks do their thing, because this is the Olaf player of the lobby so far.
Yeah, and MeeSeeks games have taken this pattern every time. Lose early. And not only lose a little bit early, get dumpstered early. Like just fall to the absolute bottom of the library, absolute bottom of the lobby, and then get the items you need, which are so, so important to Olaf. Like we talked about item and agnostic carries a lot. Olaf is not that. Olaf needs these items. And you see they're going on that Nidalee. And that just points to me, we're looking for a way out of this comp. This Nidalee is getting sold at some point, and Olaf is going to receive these items.
We're hoping to get it stacked based off of our sharpshooter trait, so we potentially could find a little bit more value. Everything is still compensation damage. Like Nidalee is just not doing the damage she used to, and so all of the items are there to compensate for damage. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where Nidalee is doing what Nidalee was doing in that last patch, and we'll see here. This is a pretty beefy front line, and Nidalee has struggled. Whoo! That missile, that Rakan too, just jumping into the back line. Yeah, and it's actually going to turn the Nidalee around. That is unfortunate for her, but maybe these Dragon Souls are going to be able to do enough since it is percent health damage. It's not going to happen for MrMeeSeeks, and I'm not sure. Oh, it is. Oh my goodness, that was actually really close. But the classic
dropping 3,400 damage.
Yeah, that classic Lulu ult right at the end, though. We've all been there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Garen gonna step in for Wukong here. Can't really blame MeeSeeks. In general, I want a Garen over Wukong right now. I think Wukong, those nerfs that Wukong took are just brutal. Because honestly, I don't think it was that good of a unit to begin with. Like you could Bonky Kong. Should you Bonky Kong? I think the answer was usually no.
Depends who you ask, man. You know, there are people who like doing things that aren't necessarily good for them.
Hey, do what makes you happy. I'm not here to judge. If you want to Bonky Kong, go for it. But don't come crying to me when the lobby doesn't break your way.
Okay. Will do. You did lead me the right direction with that Morgana, so I'm feeling pretty good about that. That Deathblade here is actually finding a lot of value. That's probably the most successful we've seen Nidalee so far, and only 1,800 frag damage, right? So we are still pushing more than 50% less damage than we used to, in my opinion. Okay, so we kind of, I think, understand where MrMeeSeeks is probably going to go. Gangly is going to be next, and he's going to be right above. He's played Fortune 2 lobbies in a row, looking for a third lobby.
Yeah, I mean, just getting offered these chosen Tahm Kenches and unable to say no. I get it, Gangly. I've been there. I have a very hard time saying no to Fortune Tahm Kench as well.
Me too. He's like your little buddy, you know what I mean? Just like, hey Thomas, come over here. We're gonna play, Candyland. It's not gonna be like a really intense game like a Monopoly.
I also just love that Kench's vibe. To me, it feels like a casino. Like it's gold and glitzy and glamorous, and like really leaning into the whole "I'm going to make you throw away your future on this fortune comp" vibe that he puts out.
Totally. I love it. Sir Thomas, buddies for life. Yeah, he's that friend in Vegas that's like, let it ride.
Yeah.
And other friends are like, please stop. Sir Thomas is going to keep you going. And you know what? Sometimes you need that friend around.
Yeah, I have many of those friends in my life. I need fewer of them around, I'm quite sure. But maybe I could just replace them all with Tahm Kench and my life will improve quite a bit.
Hey, Tom's probably better at cooking, so you're probably going to be eating better anyway. Gangly now, though, finally does have that Fortune 3 piece, has the RFC Rage Blade. So again, friends, something that you want to do at home is, okay, now that we see those items, we normally don't see those items on Sivir, right? Where are those items potentially going to go? What you got to do is you got to think about, okay, who's good with these items? You should be thinking Kayle, especially since Gangly has played Kayle already today. So that seems to be where we're going. We'll see if we're right. But the reason why we're saying this is that's how you think in this game. That's how you think in this meta, right?
Yeah, always be looking for your next move, your next transition. Try and be one step ahead of your lobby and yourself in some ways. Like ask yourself, what am I ultimately trying to do here? It's not enough just to put together a good board. I need to put together a good plan that will get me into the late game. And Gangly doing a nice job of that. Like you mentioned, when you start seeing some items that it's not like those are bad Sivir items. Like they're fine, but you just don't usually see Sivers itemized that way. So you have to ask, why are we doing that? We're probably trying to get to Kayle. Although there's a few other champs you could potentially put those items on. Kale has to be the chief suspect right now.
Will this be winnable? Sivir actually got a pretty early ult off, and with the sharpshooter buff, I am actually feeling pretty good about it. It's going to be up to this Nasus to take down the rest of the team, especially the fact that it affects attack speed. And you're seeing the Nasus nerfs right now. That Nasus wins that 100% of the time in the last patch. Like, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and Sivir just able to build up those Rage Blade stacks, eventually puts out enough damage to take down the team. Gonna go ahead and get that Fortune payout. Not a tremendous one, but still love to get on the board with Fortune. Pick up another Fortune unit, so maybe being coaxed into a 6 Fortune scenario again is Gangly. Saw a little wry smirk on his
I
face
saw
there.
that too. I mean, that's kind of like what you got to do when you're given that choice, right? Like, am I gonna be?
That's
bad?
Tom just yelling at you, let it ride.
Right? Like, am I being bad today? Is today the day I rebel? That's kind of what I go through. As like I was such like a goody two shoes in high school, and so like anytime like I break a rule, I think about it. You know, you know what I mean? I feel like dirty, if that makes sense.
That good moral compass on you. Love to see it.
It's getting worse and worse as time goes on. Anyway, Gangly is gonna get completely bonked by that Aatrox, by the way. I want someone to commit to it because I think it would work. I think it's a top 4 comp.
I mean, it's really putting out the damage. It's shining, and I would also say that these Gallios look quite strong as well. These cultist comps in general, granted it's early game, like that's cultist role to be strong there. But for the last patch, I don't even think cultist was good early game. I think it was just a straight dumpster fire. You couldn't get much out of cultist whatsoever. And now to see both some early and late game potential, yeah, look into that Aatrox, see what it can do for you.
Cultists and Keepers got a lot of nerfs, I think, early on, and I think that was kind of the result of what happened. Not really seeing a ton of Keeper packages right now because I feel like Cultist Keeper was like one of the starting kind of units that you would do. Would you pick up your Elise and Garden and just build around that, especially with Warlords being so strong. And so we're not really seeing that quite yet, but we're definitely 3 things. I'm going to repeat it since it's a new comp. CC seems to be back on the table, right? Lots of Sejuani, Aatrox, Nautilus, right? We're still seeing that auto attack based carry do very, very well as we get our first loaded dice of today. That's going to be very helpful to our Olaf players. And number 3 is it's definitely more flexible. The meta is different. There's no doubt about it. So for everyone who is worried about it maybe not impacting it, or maybe the chosen mechanics felt too friendly, the fact of the matter is everyone's choosing their chosens earlier on anyway, and it hasn't really affected the way that these games have necessarily gone. And so that would be my 3 takeaways so far after halftime. Still would love to be proven wrong, though, as dim going to be playing Bonky Kong.
itsDinoDan apparently not listening to the stream and just going for the Bonky Kong, looking to prove me wrong. You know what, itsDinoDan, I'm rooting for you. I would like to see Bonky Kong go off. Look, I like Bonky Kong as much as the next person. Just loses for me a lot. That's fine. Maybe here it'll do the job for itsDinoDan. And it does. Takes down Gangly.
Yeah, Gangly playing Fortune, so we're not unhappy about that, but we are at the round where you want to win as Fortune no matter what. I think 3-6 is... I mean, we saw someone win at 4-2 a little earlier today, and I think that was out of the ordinary, right? Usually you see everyone roll down and spend a lot of money when it comes to Fortune at this point in time because they want to transition out of it by 4-1. And since the next one is NPC, you won't get another opportunity. But Gangly playing this slow. Going to be doing it a little bit differently. Maybe because the meta is slower, you don't have to make that decision as quickly. It would be my theory.
I think that's a good theory. I think that checks out. You can play a little bit more slowly. You don't think you're just going to get blown out of the water by, like, this is the point where you expect all those reroll comps to really be online. They've made their 3-star Diana, and you're not beating a 3-star Diana with a comp that looks like this. But if everyone else is also waiting to get to the late game, and you're using these stopgap item holders like the Sivers we see holding so many items right now, maybe you can just find a win in this scenario without going all in and obliterating your economy, because like we keep mentioning, Fortune is about how you get out of it as much as when you get your W. So here's a win, very little investment. Gangly has to love to see that. Going to be able to put together a nice setup after this Fortune payout.
That was a best case scenario, to be completely honest with you, for Gangly. The fact that the Rage Blade, I think, is winning the rounds right now,
Yeah.
right? Along with the ultimate, as you see, we're already out of fortune, and this is where again you're gonna really see the moxie and like the really like the mindset of some of our players, as Gangly actually going to be waiting until the next round, leveling up a little bit to be doing anything, but it's going to be a quick turnaround, right? We don't have to really worry about these wolves, but on this next round, we're probably going to see Gangly make some moves.
I would assume so. And, a lot of buff items right now. So the team remains strong. Hidden Nikos from that fortune payout, which, if you had invested your entire economy into getting that fortune payout, you would have been very upset. But Gangly didn't. It was just something that came along almost naturally as he tried to put together a decent board. Certainly the HP is not where you want it to be, only 52 HP, but you're not in the absolute basement. You see T down there with 29 HP. So plenty of room for Gangly to maneuver. Gonna look for a chosen now, and we found a decent one.
Okay, we're feeling okay. It's decent. It's not the best version of Olaf chosen, in my opinion, but is definitely going to be worthwhile here as we're going to start seeing it pop off. We're going to go ahead and sell the silver in for these items. And again, you have to think about where those items are going to go, not where they're on right now. And you're actually seeing why things like Runins, in my opinion, really good on things like Olaf. A Runin's Hurricane, that Olaf wins that round. No question about it in my mind.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. So certainly you would prefer to find a Slayer chosen Olaf, not the Dragon Soul. But when you get an Olaf chosen at level 7, you tend not to look that gift horse in the mouth, and you take what you can get. And here, look at this, a little bit of an old school flavor. It's a Warlord comp, and you and I spoke a little bit before about units that I think did really well through this transition, ways for warlords to have a path forward. I think it's still Katarina. I think Katarina is still strong, and you see the items being put together to make that classic Katarina carry with this warlord comp.
Okay, this is the first Warlord comp we have seen today, and it is not working. As we speak, and this is nerfs in front of your face. We might have been going after another Olaf comp, as we do. I think Warlord is one of the ways that you can get into a Slayer comp, and it's going to be up to Space Jam to make it happen. And that's the thing about Darius; it's just so inconsistent. He always does just enough damage to barely let the team live. Right, and not get those resets, but works out this time.
Able to squeak through here very narrowly. The tough thing for T right now is that the economy is just in shambles, right? There's no money left whatsoever. And, there's good units here. Certainly you like to have your Katarina up to level 2. Everything's 2-star, but there's nothing above a 3 cost. So this can't be your plan for the rest of the game. And how do you build a game plan with no economy left whatsoever?
Or direction, right? We want that to be a Hextech Gunblade, but it might end up being a Raptidons, right? We could potentially have used attack speed, but we don't have the Olaf yet, right? And 3 of them we know are already out of the game because of Gangly, and I think that's probably screwing with MeeSeeks as well, sitting at 28 HP, right? Just hey, let me take 3 Olafs out real quick, right? It's going to make everyone else playing Olaf a much harder time, as this Nid has no chance of winning this out. Does take down 1 unit though, so that is going to be the difference potentially of Tian having 2 or 1 round.
Yeah, MeeSeeks we see pushing into Shyvana here, and those items work on Shyvana. I think that's fine. It wouldn't surprise me if MeeSeeks is still looking to get to Olaf, but you got to kind of have steps to your transition now. And you see there was some re-rolling going on, trying to find a new chosen, had to settle for the Shyvana, not exactly where he wants to be, but trying to just hold on till he can get the Olaf comp together.
Okay, will Gangly be able to beat the clock is the answer, right? Or whatever Infernix is running seems to be countering the lobby quite a bit. Contrado, I have been loving their play so far. I've gotten to see them play over a couple weeks, and they've always done this. They've always stayed in the top 4, and it's nice to see that it's been a little bit different this time around. And it seems to be really cool because he played Enlighten last time. Now he's doing the Fable Nico thing, right? It seems to be playing like, 5D chess, maybe overthinking some things, but the success is there.
Yeah, finds a comp that they believe is strong, and then they're in on it. And you see Concentrato just two-starred the Nico again. So they're playing a certain way. They have identified this as a comp they believe can find success in this lobby, and they're all in on it. And thus far, two very good results.
Okay, so we do get that Hextech Gunblade for T. That's a huge deal. We
Big
finally do
pickup.
have a primary carry, and that's going to feel really nice. This is one of those old school comps, and unfortunately, we didn't even get to hyper roll through it. This is just, your general tier 2 units in Warlord, and if those Warlords aren't gold, you're having a little bit of a hard time usually. And the Katarina ult is going to take almost everyone down. But the Talon with the IE is going to continue to be in its way. Lots of damage, but is able to take the win anyway.
Yeah, I'm very curious where T invested the vast majority of the economy. I would assume it was probably trying to make the two-star Katarina happen, because there isn't anything that's really over leveled or all that exciting in the rest of the team. But you see, T's a believer in those Aatrox is going to go ahead and get those items on real quick. Jeweled Gauntlet seems to be the default pickup for that unit thus far.
Okay. Yeah, buddy. That's exactly what I want to see. Jeweled Gauntlet on an Aatrox. But we're going to have a super tanky Vanguard Nautilus, probably a better choice than Braum at this point in time when it comes to that specific itemization. I would love to see, Nautilus and a Braum with those same items on the same team. That'd be absolutely insane. As a Dragon Soul comp is going to take the W here, as the lobby seems to be tightening up below the top two, but Infernix actually just took a huge loss.
Yeah, tremendous loss of HP there. Now Concentrato moving up to first place. This is an interesting Shyvana comp, right? Because for a long time, the Shyvana comp was just brawlers. And we're done with this. That's enough. Get out of here, Shyvana. Going to get offered Aurelion Soul chosen. Not going to go ahead and take that one. I think we're just on a hunt for our Olaf right now.
It's the hunt for, we're hunting Olafs. I can't do a Bugs Bunny or an Elmer Fudd, so you're just going to have to imagine it. Mr.
I did. It was beautiful in my head.
Thank you. I'm perfect in my head as well. So hopefully more people can see me that way. That'd be great. I would love to see this collector on an Aatrox as well at some point in the
that's
future.
a cool one.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to experiment with it, because I think that is where a lot of change could potentially happen. Right now, we're kind of going to the general comps back to where we were, I think, before the rerolls came into play, as Mr.MeeSeeks did get a chosen Dragon Soul Olaf.
There you go. I mean, like, that's
away.
what he's been playing for this whole time, and absolutely gets paid on it. 6 Dragon Soul ready to go. And this Olaf ready to do work. Let's see if MeeSeeks can again fall to the bottom of the lobby, find the Olaf, and turn it around.
Perfect items too, and you're really going to see the difference between an Olaf with and without Runins, most likely. This should be a pretty easy win for this Olaf, especially since,
Look at that damage.
Yeah, tons of damage and straight into the back line. And you're going to get 3 lives. And so whatever you don't kill, your Nautilus is actually going to be A-okay dealing with it, right? Or maybe
you'll get him the
your
next time.
There's or the Swain, right? There are a lot of secondary options when it comes to this Dragon Soul comp, liking it so far. It's not Slayer, it's Dragon Soul. It's a version of this Olaf comp that MeeSeeks is running.
Yeah, it's weird because in my head, Olaf is so dependent on that lifesteal. And you see, MeeSeeks ultimately agrees, going to work really hard to get that Slayer buff in there, but waffling a little bit, saying, maybe these Vanguards can just get the job done for me.
I mean, we also have an Asol 2 now, right? We have a natural Azillion 2. We haven't used our Nikos yet. We have time to make some decisions outside of just the 21 HP. As we're going to use Asol tank. We haven't seen this before, but it is going to make it so that Asol is going to proc that Dragon Soul damage. And maybe, I mean, we've seen the Declaw Thwordmail a lot today. So maybe, maybe it's just, again, just specifically Declaw becoming a little bit more valuable as time goes on, because again, a lot of what's good right now outside of Olaf is gonna get hit pretty hard by someone wearing Declaw.
No, that's a great point. And there we saw the value of having the secondary Asol carry. Olaf bit it pretty early there. Really wasn't around for much of that fight. Able to find the last damage needed to take it down, though, with that Aurelion Soul.
I love this Acel frontline. Not something I've seen not something I've really seen ever, but it makes complete sense. It kind of reminds me of Ari or Morgana back in the day, or even right now, where you
Yeah.
would put them in the front
Yep.
line. So like you would put GA on Ari, for example, put her on the front line, and so she would ult before she died. So I'm assuming it's going to be pretty similar, especially since it is an Acel too. I mean, it would be painful to sell, but we have our Slayers in now, even though they're tier 1. This comp is still looking really good with a tank Acel in the front line. This is very interesting.
Very interesting indeed. I think the thing about Dragon Soul is it's so difficult to get that buff in a place where you really want it. And you have this weird tension where whoever gets damaged first picks it up. So where you traditionally want to put your tankiest units in the front line, you also don't want them holding the buff for that long. Like the Dragon Soul buff floating onto Braum here is kind of problematic. And in some ways, it's almost good that this Braum is only a 1-star unit, because it will die and pass the Dragon Soul buff onto a unit that can use it better. So there's really interesting considerations when it comes to the Dragon Soul trait and how you're able to best maximize what your team. And I think it often involves things like putting Acel up there in your front line.
I love this. Like, we would not have seen this last patch. We actually didn't see a ton of Acel in general over the recent patches, so it's nice to see this kind of version of it. It looks good. I really like this particular version of Dragon Soul too, because like you said, it's going to put someone in the front line that's going to be useful potentially with that Dragon Soul buff. You get to your ult faster. You're not going to get that mage ult. So are you really even concerned about that damage? You know what I mean? So it's all about getting the buff on the person. And I think his natural attack speed is a little faster than Braum's. So that's a much better way of getting the proc on the correct person. Braum is tier 2
Right.
now. But look at this attack speed increase now. It's not just for the Olaf, it's for this Acel too, friends.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned the attack speed. Braum did pick up an attack speed buff as part of this patch, so helps alleviate the pain of the buff getting onto Braum a little bit, because of course it triggers after a certain number of attacks. But look at this dragon war we have going on the battlefield right now.
Oh, some
yet, and time running out to really get value from that.
Okay. Man, this is going to be a tight one for MrMeeSeeks. We're actually up against a very tanky version of a team. We said that the Nautilus could potentially be a nice counter to that Olaf, and it's looking like it's going to start out that way, as Contrado and that Nico has found massive success so far.
Yeah, but look at the Slayer buff coming through.
Yeah, the Slayer buff is all that they need. The Collector on the Swain is very, very nice, especially at the end of their ultimate. Gangly also got wiped, and so did Yiggles, the two people who were on fire. So this lobby is all of a sudden incredibly close to at least 2 Olaf players. Contrado running Nico all 3 rounds. Infernix is doing Infernix things at the top, very first to 8th type of play style. This is almost exactly how we expected this lobby to go, outside of, itsDinoDan finally coming up and playing a really good game in this lobby so far. So a lot of the same, a lot of differences. But one thing is for sure, Olaf is still quite strong. I can't say that it's a balance thing, or maybe everyone just knows it's strong, so we're doing it because it's early, right? But as of right now, this Olaf comp is definitely the most contested.
So where I come from in the collected card gaming world, there's this theory that the first week of a new metagame, be it through, bans or the release of new set or something like that, a lot of players like to default to playing what we call aggressive strategies. Because if you're aggressive, there's only so wrong things can go for you. Like, you're putting your opponent on the back foot. And I look at Olaf as basically the TFT version of that. This is being aggressive right now. Olaf's going to put out a lot of damage, really put pressure on you to find your counters to what it does. If you're not producing burst damage quickly enough, just shred your entire team eventually and use that Slayer buff to heal up. So I like the idea of just saying, here's Olaf. Are you ready for it? Do you have an answer to this? And it looks like itsDinoDan does have the answer. It's Kale.
Kale versus Olaf. I think that was kind of the 2 carries coming in here. Also, tier 3 Sivir for Infernix. We don't really see that all that often. Remember, the cultists get very strong when they're tier 3. Not the cultists, but their Supreme Overlord does. And so the Galio is going to get more stats. And Sivir's ult at tier 3 is nuts. It is going to give so much attack speed to everyone around her. It eliminates the need for attack speed items on some of your other carries. So there's going to be a little bit more flexibility. That Vanguard Nautilus with ZZ Rot now, tier 3. And while we're getting tier 3 units, it's not the 1 cost anymore, right? It's more of the 2 and 3 cost units that we're seeing, as we did see tier 3 Kindred not too long ago. DinoDan now is going to get the help from the cups on that Kindred. This is a huge Cho'Gath ult, though. Does a ton of damage. These Nikos are doing quite good, but seems to really fall off around this point against the Kales. The ZZ Rot, though, is going to be enough. I mean, this Nautilus is just not taking damage.
Yeah, the Nautilus, absolutely the difference maker in this fight. Concentrado, again, able to get this comp together, just hard forcing it every single time. Always has a 3-star Nautilus, 3-star Nikos every time we look in. And room to grow for Concentrado, because that Nico missing an item right now. Only 2 items. So you get a good 3rd item on there. This comp might really burst into the stratosphere. As far as Infernix goes, I love 3-star Sivir as a carry. I think it's 100% strong enough to get the job done. Maybe doesn't get some of the press that the other carries do, because it doesn't really have a comp it works for. Like, Sivir is generally there to hold items for Samira in most instances, but if you can find a way to build around it, I do think it can get the job done.
All right, the Aatrox not getting enough damage down on that Irelia, but we'll really see how strong this Sivir is. Not going to be doing a ton of damage on its own, but will be buffing up a team that no longer exists, as this Kale is absolutely crushing it. The Jeweled Gauntlet has been, I think, one of the more better performing Kale items so far. We do have a top 4, and Fernix is potentially going to increase their lead in terms of this lobby by a lot based off of the result on this. Concentrado could potentially take over MrMeeSeeks in that 2nd place spot with a good landing here, but look how close this lobby has gone, and that's a sign of good balance, to be completely honest with you. When the lobbies have naturally, all 3 so far, have tightened up at the end, you got to give credit to Mort, because that's exactly, in my opinion, how it should go in terms of where power levels are.
Yeah, and everyone's doing it in a different fashion. Different Chosens popping up here. We have a Chosen Aatrox with a Divine Sword on it, doing its thing and powering that Kale a little bit. All these comps, pretty unique looking stuff. And I love the diversity in Chosens we're seeing. That's really the most exciting thing of this patch so far. It's not just, can I find my 4-cost Chosen? It's what 4-cost Chosen can I make work with this team? And then I have my carry off to the side. It doesn't have to be Chosen to really get the job done. And that makes sense, because the Chosen units not as buffed as they used to be from their regular counterparts.
Mm-hmm. Also, this Kale comp and that Olaf Slayer comp, not the easiest to get to, right? So both of those comps can struggle really early, and if you don't really know how to deal with your HP as economy, it can be very tough. But DinoDan having by far the best Kale game that we've seen so far, and Fernix down to 1 HP. So Concentrado with that Nico, we talked about burst damage being so much better and is one of the best ways. You know, Nico hits that Kale in the backline. That Kale is dead, right? So it's all about where that targeting is. It's pretty much the new Ari when you get tier 3 Nico. It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, very similar feel. And we see the final item picked up for the Nico was a Spear of Shojin. So going to be a few more of those bubbles on the battlefield now for that Nico. I didn't quite make out what the Ornn item was, but that could be a big difference maker in this fight as well. It looks like it's a Death's Dance on the Kindred. So not a slam dunk item, but curious to see how this will play out now.
Man, look at just how much more CC there is in general. I'm really, really looking at this Nautilus in the front line too, who has been the tankiest unit we've seen so far today. It really has been that Executioner buff being the only thing being able to deal with the Nautilus. But if you're not within one, if your team is within 1 hex, once that, Kale transforms, you're probably doing all right. As a Deathblade is going to be on the menu, probably for Yone.
Yeah, I think Yone is the only real home for this. I don't think it's exactly the item we were looking for here. Would have preferred something that granted a little bit more safety to the Kale, probably. And it looks like a Zeeks on the side of Concentrado. So always able to make use of a Zeeks. If it equals more Nico cast, you're going to be very happy with that.
All right. I mean, I love this Jeweled Gauntlet so far. It seems to be pushing the damage exactly where it needs to go, especially against things like that Nautilus. It's just we weren't there fast enough. We don't have an attack speed item like Rage Blade on. We're sacrificing building attack speed for more constant DPS with the Jeweled Gauntlet. Not the most consistent item in the world, but definitely has been very useful, especially with the Chalice. So the Chalice is going to be increasing that AP, which the Jeweled Gauntlet is going to be increasing even more once it crits, blah, 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 along with some of the attack speed. But it's going to be the Spirit buff along with that one Zeeks with this Kale. So this Kale could technically be stronger, but with a Deathblade set 2 in the front line right now, and the fact that it's 7-1, this is going to be the last round. Is it going to be Contrado or itsDinoDan taking the lobby?
Yeah, pretty dramatic adjustments there from itsDinoDan to try and find a way to cut through this very, very large Nautilus. But Nico's still alive, targeting that set. Decent damage output from the set, but it's not going to be enough. And Concentrado is going to take down this lobby and probably get a very nice stranglehold on that first place slot as we head into our final lobby of the day.
It is very intriguing to me that, if you were to ask me, okay, if an Olaf comp doesn't win, what do you think is going to win? I probably would have been like Kale or like even like Morgana or something like that, right? Something like out of the blue. I would not have said a fabled Nico comp. That has definitely been the most surprising thing today, especially how consistent it has been. It has been, outside of the Olaf, the most consistent top 4 comp that we've had in all of our lobbies. One person is playing it, so that's definitely happening. Is Concentrado actually down 1 point on Infernix?
Yeah.
This is very, very close. So this is definitely a battle for first and a battle for third. Our 11-point friends, not out of the running, is going to need some help, but MrMeeSeeks, Concentrado, and Infernix all in control of their destiny right now. They finished in the top 3. They will be coming back. Unfortunately for Yiggles, one of our returning players, she's had a little bit of a tough day today, but is still not out of the running technically, but will need MrMeeSeeks to get 8th pretty much, and for them to win the lobby, I think is the only way we get there. So it's probably not going to happen. It is going to be the battle of first versus the battle of third. It's going to be Contrado versus Infernix. And something I always like to say coming into this last lobby, 2 things. Number 1, Infernix, notoriously rough on this fourth lobby. I really hope that's not the case this time around. Concentrado also had a rough 4th lobby the last time they were here. And so it really is all about making sure that we do our best. So if you're Infernix, Brian, are you going for just a 4th place, or are you going to just try to go with Concentrado the whole time?
I think if you alter your playstyle in the interest of, I only need to achieve this goal, I think you're setting yourself up for disaster, because the adjustments you have to make to target a 4th place over a 1st place, those are adjustments that should be made on the fly. You can't go into a lobby thinking, I should be trying to get 4th. You have to see what the lobby presents to you, then adjust as appropriate. So may there be a spot in this next lobby where they have to say, okay, this is the point where I really need to dial back my aggressiveness as in terms of how good of a comp I'm trying to put together, and hone in on 4th place. Yes, that could absolutely happen. But doing that before we get into the lobby, that sounds like a recipe for disaster to me.
I see where you're coming from, man. And I think you got to go in with a game plan. But if you go too locked in, right, you're, especially on this particular meta, you might actually have a little bit of a hard time. Might have worked last week, right? Like going Warlords. you know what I mean? But yeah, it's just not. Our Warlord comp got 7th, I believe, maybe 6th, and not too long ago. So that was the only. I mean, and we didn't even see a re-roll version of that. We saw T re-rolling, but wasn't able to get to those Warlord 3s. And now at this point, it is a requirement as we enter our last lobby. Gangly is going to be who we go for first, as we see the initial pickups. What are you looking at right now in terms of initial item pickup on your opening? What's your kind of preferred item for opening carousel?
I think you're still incentivized to take items for the 4 cost carries. So I would say bow and sword about equal. I would take whichever one functions as the blocker in the lobby. Like if there's only 1 sword available, I would lean towards sword. If there's only 1 bow available, I would lean towards bow and try and deny my opponents that. But I think that those are the champs that really benefit from having those specific items, and having the access to those champs is worth a lot. Like you're not always going to play them, but you want them to be an option, and you can be completely closed out of an Olaf comp if your items don't come together in the right way. So why not give yourself the flexibility when you're on the opening carousel and try and find something that can work?
Love that thought process. As Gangly initially starts with the bow, A lot of people, I think, just generally are attracted to bows when it comes to opening carousels. A lot of the items that bow goes into are like the quote unquote fun items, right? And so I think like Rageblade, I think, is a big like gold player trap because it's fun. Right? You
Mm.
just wanted to see how fast people attack. And while that might not necessarily be good for everybody, you are finding people find really good use out of things like Rageblade, like Kale in this particular meta. We have two brawlers now, but you can't really judge anything outside of item choices in these early rounds. Let's see what we pick up here for Gangly, and it's going to be a large rod.
Ready
So
to
we
go.
started with the
Slam
bow.
it. Put it on
So
the Tom Kench. Let's go.
Sir Thomas wants to attack fast as, ooh, interesting.
Okay.
Picks up the Warlord chosen in Italy.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to see what we're going to do with this champ. What I'm looking for is when did these items go down and what items are made? Are we going to see something to empower Nidalee? I don't think so. I think Nidalee is just supposed to be the item holder here, but I am curious what ultimately gets built. We'll have to see what comes out of this creep round.
Is it going to be anything important? It's just going to be gold. I think some players are totally okay with that, to be completely
Oh
honest
yeah.
with you. A lot of people like hitting 10 gold at 2-1 just to start getting that interest as early as possible. 2, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we could if we wanted to, but it doesn't look like that is the case. It does look like we're actually setting up for some win streaking, to be completely honest with you. With
We
the
are going to go
two
ahead and
sharp.
make the move, though. We're gonna hit the interest level, and I think that was a good read on your part, Boop. I really like that setup, particularly for this comp, where you still got a bunch of branching paths you can take, and you don't know exactly what you're doing yet.
The early game seems a lot more impactful right now, to be completely honest with you, right? Because anything can turn into anything, is what it feels like, right? And
Right.
your cultist comp could turn into an Olaf comp. Your, brawler comp can also turn into an Olaf comp, right? And you're going to get there in such different ways from those two directions. Same thing with a couple of our Kale comps. And so this early game doesn't seem to be as defined as it was earlier, and that's really, really great in terms of those chosen mechanics. And it does seem like items are hanging out on the bench a little bit longer than usual too. A lot more
Mm.
waiting, a lot more patience, especially here in the early game. So while the choices might be similar, I think the information and the way we're getting to this stuff is a little bit different.
No, that's a great observation. Certainly, time on bench for items is a really telling stat. It's not one that I have access to, but if I did, I would love to see it because I think it tells the tale of how flexible do we need to be, or is it about just making the best possible team you can early? And here we see Gangly going with the flexible approach, not going to make any items just yet, willing to let it ride with his team.
That item could go on the Nidalee. It could go on the Tristana. It could honestly even go on the Wukong, right? And I think in the past it might have, but you can't guarantee yourself that Kale comp anymore, right? So we are looking into the future, but also playing into the present. And with Gangly's comp right now, I don't think, maybe we wanted to win that first round. And since we didn't, we're going to relegate ourselves to a loss streak. We did have 2 tier 2 units, so you got to give them a little bit of a chance, but that Nidalee nerf definitely rearing its head.
Oh yeah.
And what you're saying about items too is like, say we pick up a belt on this next, carousel, right? Just the fact that we have a rod and a belt and a rod and a bow is going to cause you some choices to have to make, right? So I like where this is going right now. Again, you're probably wondering, should I just put the Rage Blade on? I probably would have, but Gangly seems to have some other ideas right now.
Yeah, we'll have to see where that's pointing. If you are actually interested in playing Warlords, I don't think you're doing anything like making a Spear of Shojin anymore, but you could want to Katarina carry. And you do see some assassins starting to make their way to the bench. We have the Diana in the comp right now, as well as a second on the bench. We also have a Pike floating. So that points me in a direction that says maybe we do want to get Katarina into this comp and have that be our carry and try and put together the classic Warlord comp.
All right, someone tried a lobby ago and did not find that success. I'd actually love to see after this carousel what Laplace is up to. Only because I feel like Laplace is like a good read on what the meta is, to be completely honest with everyone at home. Laplace tends to be pretty meta in the way that they play, but also pretty flexible. So I think it's going to be like a good look into the mind of someone who thinks flexibly when it comes to some of these team comps, because Gangly has not been that person so far, right? It's been Fortune at the beginning, moving into Olaf or Slayers a little bit later. Mr.MeeSeeks has not been that person. So I'm curious to see if Laplace is kind of going to be doing a couple more pivots, but Gangly needs to get that Warlord trait going, or else that Nidalee is never going to get stronger. We do have a couple Warlords. We picked one up from the carousel. We have a Runins now. We have an Ionic Spark, which used to be one of my favorite items on Diana, but we're still holding on to them as components.
Yeah, if you watch the way Gangly approached the carousel, it did seem like he was very interested in just picking up a cat, and the cat had a glove, so like a decent cat item. I would read it as Gangly is leaning towards an actual Warlord comp, but time will tell.
Okay, we actually picked up a Diana Chosen here with 2 Dianas in the pack remaining. We could take these. It's not going to mess with our economy at all. So what happens here is going to be very telling on where Laplace is going to go. Diana should be able to take at least one more of these units. Oh, never mind. Did not get that ult off, but itsDinoDan's going to continue that undefeated streak as Yiggles and itsDinoDan continuing on at 100 HP. Very early Tryndamere, though.
Yeah. First chance on level 5 to pick up a 4-cost unit. Tryndamere going to rear their head. See a few options available for Laplace now. Could get that fortune start in that so many players have shown a predilection for. Going to go ahead and sell the Chosen now on level 5. Done with Diana, not interested, and going to make the shift into Chosen.
And this is where we're going to see the fortune changes, or not the fortune changes, the chosen changes, is this particular situation. We're at 2-6. We don't have a fortune on the field. We might actually want to start losing. We have 92 HP, so we're totally cool with losing even 4 rounds in a row. And honestly, our team is not looking mega strong. We actually see our first Yasuo chosen on the field. So it seems like a couple of people kind of reverting back to some of our one-cost chosens.
Yeah, I would say we've seen more 1-cost Chosens in this lobby than we did in like all the other lobbies combined. It's a pretty drastic shift into these Dianas, Yasuos, Nidalees. They just weren't around in the first few games. Now all of a sudden they're the focus again. But a quick win there for the Fortune comp and taking down the previously undefeated Yiggles with really not much issue, which is odd because I don't love anything about the way this comp is set up right now, but just able to find a W.
Assassins with Frozen Heart has always been an idea, right? Like if you have those items like last, you would put them on a Pike or a Katarina because it helps them get to their ult. I mean, it could win you around, but don't let your confirmation bias get you. It's one of those things where you see it work once, you're like, best item in the game, gonna put it on Assassins every single time. You just kind of ignore all the times it doesn't work. I do think it was a reason why Laplace was able to take down that last round win, but the thing about Frozen Heart that's really interesting to me in completing those items is components are more flexible, right? So when you commit to the Frozen Heart, you're committing to that Frozen Heart, especially on a 1-cost unit. It is going to take 2 hexes now out of the circle. So it's not just the surrounding area around Katarina. It will be 2 hexes around her this time around. This is the first time we've seen this set.
Yeah, if 1 Frozen Heart is interesting, then 2 Frozen Hearts is super interesting. And that cat looking to slow down the back line here. You see those frosty symbols popping up over the opposing team's head. I think what's real interesting here for Laplace is just an excellent Chosen pickup, a Chosen Kindred coming to play, and the damage output on that unit with nothing on it, spectacular. Also adding the spirit buff to the team. So I think that was a real big pickup for Laplace, and is going to be able to just get that fortune buff to do the fortune has 2 modes. It's either the one giant payoff after you lose a lot, or it's a consistent payout over multiple rounds when your team is strong. And that's the way Laplace is leaning right now with the addition of that Kindred.
Yep, Kindred, one of those chosen units I think you always have to consider, to be completely honest with you, especially at this point in the game. Both Spirit and Executioner are amazing chosen choices, right? You only need the one to get the value out of it. So chosen Kindred always good. We saw a Kindred 3 a little earlier today with pretty good success. Kindred, I believe, has the highest base spell damage out of all the tier 3 units, which I believe is 450 on the ult plus Grievous, which is a lot. And so this Kindred can carry, but Kindred's one of those like 4 or 5 round carries isn't like a late game carry usually. If you 3-star it and you have best in slot items and you're able to one shot everyone, even through a Dragon's Claw, right? Then you're probably going to be okay. But also, this can happen, which is when your Kindred is like, I want to see your face up close, and wants to do the kisses on the cheek, but instead gets Vigor
Yep.
ulted instead.
Yeah, a leap right into danger. Kindred is known to do those. One of my favorite comps was Hunters with Chosen Kindred back in the day. That was quite powerful early on in set 4. And, you would do Jeweled Gauntlet, i.e. blue buff Kindred, and just run over the opposing team. I rarely see a Kindred carry these days, but still a very, very strong unit.
Yep, that's when the auto attacks mattered on the Kindred, right? Like, because every third would be % health, and so you got the auto attack buff plus the Hunter buff plus the Spirit buff, and Spirit with Hunter was pretty good for a time, and so Kindred feeling very good about its position. It is a very stable unit. It's kind of like the 3-cost version of Fiora, in my opinion, just like really well designed. Unit in the game. It'd be weird if they weren't there. Because it's losing against a tier 2 unit and winning against the tier 1 units, which it should, in my opinion. But the Kale is pushing through that damage. They weren't able to get into the backline, and MrMeeSeeks having another hard time, but we all know where that's going to end up, right? So we'll see if that's going to continue on.
Yeah, MeeSeeks down at the bottom of the lobby again. Nothing new there. That's how MeeSeeks has basically played every single round. Also leaning towards the bottom of the lobby, although not quite so dramatically, in Fernix. So you have to ask, well, where's Concentrado? And Concentrado's on fire in second place right now. Would love to know what they're up to. I'm assuming I know, but I would love to take a peek in so we could see if they're working on that Nico comp one more time.
Oh, we're about Yiggles. Thank you.
I thought I saw cultists.
Yep, it is cultists.
No, I'm still not even sure. Is it?
I see a Sivir and a Rakan chosen. So totally different, this 4th lobby. And I don't know if I like that. Things have been so successful for you running that Nico. It's been 3 top 4s in a row, running the same exact comp, 3 lobbies in a row. When you're in a situation like this, I mean, it's proven, right? So curious.
It is.
What that means. Also, in terms of items, we haven't seen many Hodges, which used to be kind of like the slammable item right now. A lot more attack speed, a lot more Olaf items. We're going to see a Hodge here on the Kale, but definitely not as popular as it used to be.
Yeah, it does feel like it's falling off a little bit as we say that. These two Hodge carries are going to take each other on, of course. Caster's Curse. You had to expect that one coming.
Okay.
But I don't have a real thing to point to as to why Hodge should fall out of favor here, short of the games going a little bit longer and you're not being incentivized to really take over the early parts of the game quite as hard.
Look at this Kale nerf, huh?
Yeah, I think in a lot of scenarios, old Kale might have won that, but it still looked fine. Like, you're really going to complain about your 1-star unit being able to keep pace with a chosen Shyvana that has basically perfect itemization? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think honestly the 3-cost units in this game are pretty well balanced. Like, they all feel strong when they're supposed to be strong, right? You can tier 3 them. Like, tier 3 Shyvana can do work, right? With especially with best in slot items. We actually saw it last lobby do that work indeed. And so that's the other thing about this set is you don't have to hyper focus on specific carries. Yes, the Olaf and the Kale, more so the Olaf been successful. We've seen some offshoots find some really good stuff, particularly some damage Aatrox, like buttering up the damage in the front line. And once that Kale transitions, or once someone else that your primary carry gets going, everyone's already half health. So a lot of different the primary carries are moderately similar, but what you're seeing is secondary supportive carries. That seems to be changing slowly but surely.
That sounds like a good assessment to me. It's interesting. We talked about Concentrado a little bit and the desire to see them back in the same Nico comp again. I think the best version of a player who quote unquote forces a comp is the one who has a heavy predilection for going in that direction, but also knows when it's time to bail. because you can't do it 100% of the time. Maybe you can do it 50, 60, 70, 80% of the time. Maybe even if you're just a hard focused one trick, you know everything so well, you can make this comp work 90% of the time. But there's still going to be those moments where you have to know this is not going to work this game. The units are just not there. I don't have the items for it, and I need to explore something else. And if Concentrado shows off the ability to make those adjustments on the fly, it really says a lot about their abilities as a player.
Oh, man, good thing. Too bad we didn't hold off on that Hodge, right? We got way better items for that Kale on that next NPC
We
round.
did, yeah.
That is unfortunate. Hindsight's 2020, right? I respect the move, but it's only wrong because of the items we got. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, one of the most frustrating things about TFT is that, like, yeah, it's a it's unfortunate, but at the time, I think the Hodge was just a way to try to get some wins in the early game. As MrMeeSeeks is actually got really good items on Samira, but
yeah,
no one
and
else.
falling into another Olaf comp, but no items for the Olaf yet. Just going to go ahead and empower the Samira early on, and I get that. This would be my move as well. Let's see what Samira looks like now, having to bear the carry load with a little bit more vulnerability in the early game. Gonna go ahead and ult.
Thank goodness for that Hodge, though, and that's another reason why I think the argument for building Samira as a tank is actually is up there. 2 ults might be better than 1 in that situation, and cumulatively in terms of damage, yeah, that Samira did a lot, but didn't kill anyone, right? So maybe you use it as a way to taunt some people. You know, she is invulnerable through a lot of that, so. And we're going to go ahead and sell the item. I respect this because we saw the Talon chosen. We have good Talon items. No need to be hard-headed and not go this way because we like Olaf, right?
Yeah. Oh, I love this move. Look at how efficiently it's being done. 2 perfect talent items. Going to be able to load up that Morgana right away with a Morellonomicon. Chalice ready to go. So going to put out some damage right away. The old comp wasn't working. You had to find something new. Your time is short. And I love this complete lack of hesitation. You got offered the 4 cost chosen ahead of schedule. You got it on level 7, which isn't supposed to happen all that often. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Be ready to move into a new comp. And despite MeeSeeks' predilection for playing Olaf, they're able to make the move. And I think they ended up much, much better for it.
Because of 2 reasons. Number one, Talon has always been good against Kale, just in general, right? Like it is not going to get to the Kale last. Talon will eventually get to the Kale probably 3rd on the list of armor. And so proven to take down the Kale. We know that works. The second thing about this that I really want to put out is I think that's the best I've ever seen MrMeeSeeks play TFT. To be completely honest with you, right? The fact that he clocked the Talon and clocked all the items, not just for the Talon, but also for the Morgana, I think was a huge window into how much better MrMeeSeeks is playing right now. Honestly, I'm happy to say that's some of the best play I've seen MrMeeSeeks go through. It might seem simple to some people, but this Talon wasn't here 2 rounds ago. We were at 15 HP, and now this comp is looking like a top 4 comp because of these Talon items. So really big props to MrMeeSeeks. Snaps to you, man.
Yeah, I agree. That was just a beautiful transition. And you see the immediate dividends being paid as that Talon leaps onto a Kale immediately, a 2-star Kale, and just deletes it from the battlefield and easily finds a huge win for MeeSeeks because you don't have losses to give anymore. So you needed your comp to be online now, and MeeSeeks found the way to make it happen. Really impressive stuff.
I love Talon comp. I don't know what about it. Talon has something. He's got a new skin in the game. Looks great. Right. So it was one of the first comps I ever won with in this set, and with, you know, potential slayers, with spirits that go along with assassins. You can actually fit Talon into a lot of situations, but this one I think is the best one, the 4 enlightened package. With, you don't need the 3 assassins, 2 should be fine. But the big thing here is just pushing damage to Talon. So the addition of the Akali is not for Akali. The addition for, you know, the Diana, yes, is to get some of that spirit buff that's always good for assassins, but it's all for Talon, right? All of this is for Talon in the end.
Yep, finding ways to empower our Talon and let that guide us to victory. Definitely will be keeping a close eye on MeeSeeks' life total as we head over to itsDinoDan's board, looking like another Kale comp here.
All right, so definitely one of the better Kale players in the last lobby. Different item set this time, though. It is going to be the Hodge and the Rabadons. RFC, I think, is required, or else your Kale is going to have to move around and put herself in positions where she could get Sedge ulted, for example. But that's probably the biggest change from the first lobby, is Sedge was like the most contested unit in the first lobby, and we didn't see her at all in the last one. And that's how fluid competitive lobbies can be. But I think that's also, and this is the word of the day, part of the new meta, in my opinion, right? Your first game, everyone has Sejuani. Your second game, no one has Sejuani, but everyone's still playing Olaf, right? It's just kind of what's going on. And itsDinoDan loving the Kale, double Zeke, so not having the Rage Blade, not really that big of a deal.
Oh no, that Kale dropped 7,500 damage despite being a 1-star unit in that last fight. So the Kale is empowered. The items are good. The buff items are very good. I think it's absolutely online right now. And you mentioned a lack of Sejuani's, but where we do see a Sejuani is in this comp, playing a little bit of a defensive role alongside Aatrox. So just finding time for Kale to operate is so critical for these comps. And I like this new setup. We were doing it with adepts for a long time. I kind of like a Vanguard setup a little bit better. Of course, I immediately doomed itsDinoDan to lose miserably by giving props to the way he has set up his comp. So I'm sorry, itsDinoDan. I'll watch from now on. I won't say anything.
The biggest caster curse I've ever done in TFT was actually on Infernix, where I went, I think he's going to break the record. And then he got 7th. And so I've never really gotten it. I still feel really bad about it. So when Infernix eventually breaks the record, we'll get there. But
hopefully
now
itsDinoDan finds it in his heart to forgive me for that caster faux pas and dooming him to a loss that round.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll have to ask a little bit later. It's important. But this Kale's going to need to be a Kale 2 here soon, or else it's just going to get taken down. We do have the 4 Divine, so it isn't going to be, like wet tissue paper. And we have an Eco, so we only need the 1 Kale. I think if we land 1 Kale and we are uncomfortable with our economy, to go ahead and use that Nikos on the Kale, because it is contested, just not as much as before. Level 8 roll downs are always really fun because you get like a spattering of those legendaries, and every legendary you see, you can either take from someone else, which I would love to happen more often, or you can keep it for yourself and start building Bill Gates / legendary compositions. But something I actually think is really curious is, in the past, right, we've seen the Yuumi carry the double Zekes, right, and the and a lot of those cross items like the cup, right? Why put it on the Kindred in this situation?
I think so much of it comes down to timing. Like, essentially, it doesn't matter all that much who carries those units. You just got to have them at an early stage of the game. So it's possible the Kindred showed up before the Yuumi did. And once you put the first buff item on a unit, you want to put all the buff items on a unit. So there's inertia with making that first move. For my play, I don't really have a strong preference whether it's Yuumi or Kindred carrying. I guess you can make the argument that, like, you can find Yuumi to be a better carrier because it's possible you may want to throw an item on the Kindred at some point just to buff its damage output. But I think this comp is just always going to be so reliant on Kale that it doesn't matter all that much. And I bet it's more about timing than anything. Just Kindred was ready to hold them before Yuumi was.
Cool. Both 3-cost units. That makes complete sense, right? It's just someone arrived at the party a little early. I was always like, I liked arriving early at parties back in the day, so I could like see everyone come in, and so I didn't feel like I needed to find people once I was there. They found me. Right? I'm a good person, I swear.
I like that strategy. So
it's time.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's nice sociology, right? itsDinoDan, 38 HP. At the top of the leaderboard, it's Contrado at 70, but is losing. The rest of the lobby really competing. Contrado wins out this lobby. He will win the day. That is for sure, especially with Mr.MeeSeeks having a little bit of a hard time. Where is Infernix? Let's go ahead and check in on where they are in the leaderboard. And the Infernix curse might strike again, right? It's so funny because a lot of times when you see patterns, at first you're like, okay, like maybe this was just a unicorn moment, right? Like it's not really a thing, but this is the 3rd time we've seen Infernix struggle in the 4th lobby. What do you think that's about? Why would you consistently do so well in 3 lobbies and have a harder time on this 4th one? Because it's not just him.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think in some instances, the narrative, when it first builds, it's just chance, right? It just so happened that this person felt in a lobby 2 times in a row, and that gets this ball rolling where you start hearing about this narrative, and now you're aware of it, and now you're thinking in your head, well, I don't want that to happen again. People will say I can't close in these situations, and you start making drastic changes and getting out of your comfort zone, and then you doom yourself. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at that moment, and Infernix has gone out in 7th place. So despite being in incredible position going into this round, the curse has struck again.
Yeah, that fourth lobby curse is, oh, you're new here, so you don't know all the curses that we've come up with here. Not a lot of like good luck charms, but like 8 million curses we've come up here. So the first one is almost everyone gets eliminated on their third week. This when they come back to Fight Night Rising, it's very, very consistent. No one here, I believe, on their third week. I think all of them were new winners last week. And then the second one is whoever is leading coming into the fourth lobby will get 7th or 8th place. And it happened again. And it happens all the time. And I'm still trying to figure out like exactly what the science behind that is, because it is probably one of the most consistent things we see here at Fight Night is that drop off on that last lobby. It's incredible. It really, really is.
Yeah, an interesting scenario, especially if it's repeating itself time and time again. And if you're Concentrado, you have to love this, seeing your two closest competitors absolutely flailing at the bottom of the library, or at the bottom of the library lobby when you're in first place. 54 HP, looking very comfortable. You look at this comp, as we now see Concentrado on the other side. It's got some good features. It's got the Sivir ready to go. It's got the Cultist buff ready to come and summon Galio, and a pretty well itemized Samira, but ultimately not the most powerful comp in the lobby. So I think Concentrado is going to be spewing some HP for a while. Really wants to see if MeeSeeks can go out. And there it is. MeeSeeks is eliminated. Concentrado has to love to see that.
Gangly might have done enough to sneak into third place here. Was 2 points, I believe, behind MrMeeSeeks in fourth place. So we just need to finish 2 spots ahead, right? If we finish in fourth place or better, if you're Gangly, I believe you've done enough to get third place in the lobby, especially since Yiggles and itsDinoDan playing more of a spoiler situation right now. Definitely spoiling MrMeeSeeks in terms of this particular lobby. MrMeeSeeks starting with a win. Last lobby, I think, had one of the best pivots I've ever seen them do. Unfortunately, we end the day in the 6th place, but I think there's a lot of good to take out of MrMeeSeeks' play today.
Oh, yeah. I was impressed throughout. Particularly that one transition was very strong. But now the story is about Gangly and can solidify the position a little bit more. Playing 8 brawlers, a comp which really got hit hard with the nerf bat. But you look around at the units that Gangly has, things look good. There's a 3-star Nunu. There's an orange spewing out some items. So like, if you were to ask me, can brawlers still be viable? I would say, here's the test. If this comp fails, then brawlers might just be a little bit too weak going forward. Because I like a lot of the pieces, and there's another nice piece as well, Eternal Winter coming down.
This is arguably the best porn item in
now
the
it
game,
was nerfed. It was nerfed on this patch, and pretty substantially. So I believe it went from requiring really 5 auto attacks. I agree with you. I still think it's a powerful item, but it was preposterous before.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, and let's think about why it still would be good, right? It's because we're still seeing Kale, right? It's not going to work on the Olaf because the Olaf is immune to that during the ult, but it's going to work on Kale. So especially since we do have 2 Kale comps still here remaining. Not a big fan of the Nunu items. If there's not a Hextech Gunblade on the Nunu, it's going to be tough to help that Nunu carry. We will get a couple eats. It's more to tag the Grievous, but this set is going to be the difference maker, especially if we get set 2, which doesn't look like it's in the cards right now. Now
we have the Nikos ready.
We have the Nikos. So set 2, I think, is the way to go. And Gangly now setting themselves up for that top 4 for sure, in my opinion. I say throw it on Cho'Gath. Yeah.
Yeah, Cho'Gath is going to go ahead and get that Warmogs. And let's watch the set and see what it's able to do in this fight. Going to be playing in both a little bit of offense, a little bit of defense. Gets blown up, going to go do some sit-ups, see if Nunu can buy the time set needs to get back to buff, and I think it will. Set's looking very strong right now. Enough that Gangly's willing to go check in on another game.
He saw that the Talon got 8 and was probably pretty confident, and Gangly has done it, friends. 2 places ahead of MrMeeSeeks. I'm notoriously bad at math, especially on camera, so I'm not going to confirm just yet until the very end of the day, and we get all of the lobby information. But Gangly in 4th place, I believe, is enough to take over MrMeeSeeks in 3rd, and it might not even be the end for Gangly, especially tier 3. The Nunu has the set tier 2, has the Shyvana now. Cho'Gath is tier 2, and while this comp got nerfed, I mean, a Jeweled Gauntlet wrapped on set will always do damage.
Yeah, I mean, the units here are so powerful. 2 3-star, 3-cost units, a 2-star set with awesome items, an Ornn that's been cranking out items the entire time. So I think whether this comp is nerfed or not, this is a really good example of the ceiling of this comp. This is how good it could possibly be. And let's see if it's enough to take down Yiggles on the other side with this Kale comp. Now, Kale, typically a hard counter to the brawlers I've found, but Nunu says, I don't think so. Get over here, gobble them up.
Okay, so this all but
there from
guarantees the
Gangly.
top three at this point in time. Contrado, I believe, has done enough to win the lobby. Again, we'll see
Believe
at
so.
the end of the day, but Contrado had a day today. Actually, very impressed with that player overall. I've seen Contrado play a couple weeks now, and always plays something off, kind of like the beaten path, but always finds success about it. So Contrado played 3 Nico 3 games in a row, right? And is going to win today. So let's put that into perspective. I think it more so, if I were to really call it out for what it is, it was really a Nautilus 3 comp versus a Nico 3 comp personally. But the Nico definitely helping out. But Nautilus 3 definitely, I think, something that you should try at home if you want some success. This Nunu is going up into the front line, has a lot of attack damage because of that Hodge. And there's just too much HP for Gangly now. And I think Gangly could potentially win this lobby because of it. Could get a double win here. Yeah, it does take down itsDinoDan with his own Ghost. So Gangly looking very, very strong. That Nico's on set might have been the game-changing situation for Gangly.
I think so. I think that's what really turned the corner. Gangly looking incredibly strong right now. Also gets a Zephyr, the best possible item basically for these heads up or near heads up scenarios when you reach the end game. So you have to love that pickup. When it comes to Concentrado though, look at this comp they're playing with, and you see Gangly routinely looking back on it. There's almost no order to pull out from it. It's like 3 Slayer, 3 Cultist, 3 Sharpshooter. What exactly is going on? And again, creative, expressive play, something different. The pieces didn't come together for Concentrado, and they found a different way to solidify themselves at the top of the lobby. Whether they win or not, they did exactly what they needed to here and played beautifully throughout the day.
Yep, completely agree. Concentrado is the most consistent player of today, and you got to give them props for doing that a couple weeks in a row. Just, man, there's just some people that you kind of just see play, you're like, there's something here, right? And I definitely feel that way about Concentrado right now, representing Brazil, I believe. So the Triforce on the Vi, good item on the Rift. We'll see if it's going to help you stay alive, but if you're going to be CC'd forever, especially with the Frozen Heart on that Lee Sin, it's going to be tough. And this set is about to ult. Which direction is it going? Is it all right? It's
not the cleanest ult, but
one
it does not
elimination.
matter.
Yeah, Contrado 2 HP. It's going to be 7-2. This is the last round of the day. Will Gangly win his first ever Fight Night Rising lobby, or will Contrado put the cherry on top of an already game-winning day? Brian, you take the call for this one, my friend.
I don't want to curse Gangly here, but I think Gangly's a huge favorite as we head into this final fight to get this W. I think Concentrado's team was designed to get him into the top of the lobby, did a beautiful job at doing so. But now I think it's just a little bit overmatched, and we'll see what this huge set is able to do, what that Shyvana can do. Can it avoid this Lee Sin? Lee Sin lined up right over the Shyvana to start. That's problematic. And but you see it hops after a meaningless Maokai.
Dude, look at the HP on the Shyvana. It is so much. It looks like a singular health bar. And there's no way Set ever doesn't complete those sit-ups. And Gangly is going to win his first ever Fight Night Rising lobby on his second ever day, I believe, here in Fight Night Rising. What a meteoric rise for Gangly, coming from a community member for a podcast that I pretty much don't do anymore. That I haven't done in like 3 months, right? You know, we're just chatting on Discord, and he's like, hey, I want to get more involved. And all of a sudden, I see him making content. He's making guides with Gunmay, and now is a lobby winner here on Fight Night Rising. That's the type of story I love here in esports. Also, new dad.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congrats to Gangly for picking up a W, but also got to give mad props to Concentrado for a beautiful overall day of TFT. Just diverse comps in the end game, showing a comp that everyone else was seemingly sleeping on in the early game. I mean, he's the only person who played Nico today. It's not like when he abandoned Nico in the 4th lobby, other people ran to pick it up. It's just had the special sauce. Like you said, maybe that special sauce was Nautilus. I buy that. Nautilus looking like quite a powerful unit through so many of those rounds, but just so impressed with the quality of play from Gangly and Concentrado and really all of our players today. It was a really fun first look at this new metagame.
definitely 4 different lobby winners, right? MrMeeSeeks won the first one, then Infernix, and then Contrado, and then finally Gangly. But it's going to be Contrado taking the W, Infernix in second, Gangly in third, MrMeeSeeks starting off really strong, but had a hard time maintaining. itsDinoDan doing the opposite, but a little too late.
Yeah.
Yiggles, a returning player from last week, unfortunately, she is not going to return next week. Laplace and T rounding out the top 8. What a cool day of games, though, Bryan. Like, for real, it was just so different. It felt like a Listerine strip. You remember those? Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Put them under
Yeah.
your tongue or on your tongue, and you
Yeah,
have fresh breath all of a sudden.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No,
And like a lot of
I
different
agree with
things
you.
work.
And yeah, it was the metagame was so fresh, and it's day one. Who knows how long that lasts? But I have a good feeling about what we saw today. I mean, just general impressions, Boop. What did you think of the different comps we were seeing? And I think not only what we saw, but what we didn't see, because it feels like there's still so many things that we saw glimpses of or moments of that could still be further explored at this moment.
I totally agree with you. I still would like to see like a duelist, like a regular, some of these hyper roll comps just compete against some of these more late game oriented comps. Like if we just take the
Yeah.
HP off of them earlier, are they even going to be able to get to the same place that we saw them get to today? That's the big one, is the complete lack of duelists. The only reroll comp we saw, and it wasn't even reroll either time we saw it, was Warlords. And so none of what happened last patch seemed to have transferred over. The other thing is Kale still good? I don't believe won a lobby today, and so it was a top 4 situation most of the time.
Yeah, it was around for sure. And it always felt like it was influencing the games, but ultimately not winning them. It was Olaf, Nico, and then Brawlers, which is a comp that I just don't think anybody really had on their radar. After a pretty substantial nerf to 8 Brawlers, it really felt like that was going to fall off. But you do enough with those set items, you can make it work.
All right, Contrado, are you here, my friend? Are you here, my friend? Contrado, can you hear us? We cannot hear you if that's the case. We'll get that figured out. If you guys have questions for Contrado, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll look them up, and if we have the opportunity, we can ask them once they do get on here. But let's continue that conversation, because we want to ask Contrado the same thing, right? Is why Nico, right? 3 times in a row, or why, that Nautilus? Is it just such a front line that whatever is behind the Nautilus will work, right? Because wasn't that the whole point in the patch notes? Mort pretty much said it himself.
Yeah, look, the patch notes are supposed to be clues for what you do week one. And when we go back to the issue of no hyper rolls, I think that's really a big part of the equation, because the patch notes didn't say you can no longer play hyper rolls, but they hinted pretty heavily that it would be difficult to do so. And in this high risk scenario where there's real cash money on the line, not just a ladder game, you want to have your best comp out there. And if I were participating in these lobbies, I wouldn't have had the gusto to go for it on these reroll comps. It just feels too uncertain at this moment. I don't have enough information to know they can still be viable in this new metagame.
So, Brian, what is something that you kind of just want to talk about right now? We talked a lot about the meta. We talked a lot about certain things, but what's kind of going through your mind? What are you excited about for the future that we got to see today?
I think so much of it is just a return to the expressive play. That was the thing we kept harping on. But TFT is at its best, in my opinion, when anything is possible every single time you log in. If the paths forward are dictated, it can get a little stale. And by the end of metagames, that's kind of what happens. Like, you've seen all the beats before, you know the notes, okay, this is where I transition into my dust comp, or this is where it's time to reroll or hyper roll and just get to a place where I have my 3-star unit. And I know authoritatively this is the best thing I can do. There's a theoretical TFT patch which should have so many branching paths that it's always going to be defined by the shape of the lobby. Now, it's probably rare that that happens, because that's an incredible Herculean task and balance, but it can be done. And I have a good feeling about the way things started today. I'm not saying it's a done deal, but I am inspired by the creative play I saw.
I gotta say, I am 100% gonna play Nico when I when I play again. I'm also going to put IE Jewel Gauntlet on Aatrox. Other things that we saw today that were a little different was, again, a lot of people putting Aatrox down as a just an item holder and ends up just keep the items, and because everything seems to work on it. I remember even in the very first set, a joke I used to make is just put it on Gnar, right? Gnar was so good that you could just put whatever item you wanted on him at the time, no matter what it was. And I think Aatrox is like a definitely neutered version of that, but can suffice as an off-tank bruiser type of carry. And I think that with a little bit of burst, he's the only character in the game that's like that right now.
Yeah, it feels like a very unique character. In some ways calls back to Riven a little bit, I think, as well, where very much you could, build full tank, you could build with some more damage items, and you could ask Riven to do whatever you needed it to. I think eventually Aatrox will carve out the same role for itself on this patch.
Okay, so that's what we think are going to happen. But chat, what are you thinking is going to happen in this patch? We got to see 4 lobbies today and 4 close ones pretty much the entire time. I mean, that last 4th lobby only came down to 12-7-7, I believe, on that HP, ending at 7-1. So people are still learning what's going to happen. Are we going to continue seeing Olaf? Are we going to see maybe a transition to some other tankier people like that, a Vanguard comp with the Nautilus or with the Nico? We shall see. But all I know is it's time to play some ranked on the TFT new patch right now. I know the two of us are going to do it. So Brian, any final words? And by the way, we are not going to be doing the interview right now due to some technical difficulties, unfortunately. So we are going to have to just close it out. But Brian, anything for the fans watching right now for your first ever fight night, dude? This is good.
Yeah, I had a blast. Just as always, thank everyone at giantslayer for having me. It's always fun to come out and commentate one of these events, especially day 1 of a new patch. It felt like a really unique opportunity. So I'm thankful for it. And I'm thankful for everyone for showing up, watching, supporting what we're doing here, and having a good time with us on Fight Night Rising.
Brian, always a pleasure. Anytime, man. Anytime you want to do this, I am always game. Again, everyone, ranks back up. Go ahead and play your games on the Rift right now. TFT is going to be the name of my week so far here. Cannot wait to build new carries, get into the lab, and make things happen. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to everyone behind the camera, our producers, our scorekeepers, and thank you to everyone watching and the players playing today. We really appreciate you, and today was a great day of games. And we'll see you for the next one next week. There is going to be a qualifier on Monday. I will be there with Bunny Muffins. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but giantslayer seems to really like casters whose name starts with B. So if you're trying to get in
policy.
here,
Good policy.
That might be a really good way to get introduced. But no, it's just one of those patterns that have happened. But yes, Bunny Muffins and I will be here on Monday, and then the actual qualifier is going to be hosted by Frodan, Wolfie from the Pokemon world. That's going to be really great, and Bryce Blum, who I casted with a month ago, who was phenomenal at it. So I'm really excited for everything that's going to be happening. Challenger Series will be on Monday. We'll see you for the qualifiers on the 26th, I believe. And we'll see you here for Fight Night Rising next week on a Thursday. We'll see you then.